also you could see that it was a dual, welcome message that was rendered yesterday in committee, as well as Engineer Udor, representing the permanent secretary of the ministry, who was rendering the public sector welcome address. So on all fronts, that partnership with the private sector as a disposition of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and indeed this administration is very clearly playing out, in this activity. We had a session immediately afterwards, in which we kind of drilled down on the content of the messages, rendered by all the contributors. Vice President's presidential speech, around it. And the Honorable Minister, of course, made profound contributions to that session. And the key takeaways: the public sector is ready to engage with the private sector, going for ensuring that the Nigerian unleashed for value as it relates to engendering the Nigerian economy. If we are to look at the setting for today, we want to just underscore that is basically to get to the deal room, and we were able to engage, around transactions that basically are ongoing in the pipeline there in the room. And the critical one which stood out was the All Farmers as Naira on two commodities, rice and wheat. So Tingo, as a private sector entity, is basically to basically conduct production activities around those two commodities. That for engaging, in agribusiness and investing in agribusiness, if they understand the organized, well-structured, coordinated, so as to confidence into process of generating investments. It ties into today's sessions that we have outlaid, the first sessions. We know that we're well behind time, but please let me crave your indulgence to just take us through what we will be having today. The first session today is an interesting one. If you have your program, please just to it. The first session is an agro-industrialization session, and it basically is around agro-industrialization in trying times, fixing the nuts and bolts. That's the topic. Discussants here are very interesting. Laji Alwan Hassan of the Bank of Agriculture, Vincent Ebwe of GB Foods, Professor Banjo Yelara Oyeyinka of the African Development Bank, Pirelli Limited. We have also outlined Mr. We are a program coordinator for CPs. The next would be the productivity plenary, transforming farm productivity through Innovation School, Bayero University. The CEO of Alvin Blanche. Mr. Danjuma Adejo is there. I see Mr. Sriram Venkateswaran, and the moderator is Ms. Chineze Emejulu, who is sitting member of faculty at the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, UK. In the face of climate adversity, you'll agree with me that in itself is a critical area that we need to. So is Professor Chidozie Gessi, the Executive Director of National Root Crops Research Institute. Then we have a trade and export plenary, creating a robust inter and intra-African trade and entire value chain approach. This is where we have the likes of Mr. Bukunso Rinola, Mr. Sharif Balogun is in there, Dr. Quite star-studded, but the Lagos Business School. He focuses on agriculture. He has his hands in agribusiness. So, Commodities and Exchange, the Vice President, Nancy Olisakwe, moderating, alongside Mr. Kabir Lawal from Nile Business Partners sitting in there. Then we'll have, finally, brief feedback from the deal room. We expect that we would have tied up, quite a number of transactions up for us over the last 2 days. That would be handled by Mr. Lumide Ojo, Chief of Party for the deal room process with the summit. Having said all this, let me have the honor of inviting for regarding agro-industrialization. I want to call up Director GB Foods Limited. I know he's represented here, but is the MD GB Foods represented? Okay, that's fine. This is the Director Marketing, I think, Corporate Affairs, and Agri. Yes, this is Dr. GB Foods Limited. The next I have the honor to call up is Mr. Bolaji Akimboro, founder up here. We have Professor Banji online. Need to have him online. Dr. Kabir Yusuf, please, you are the moderator for this session, so you can kindly take your seat. No. Here, Director of Fisheries and Aquaculture of the Ministry. I know I haven't seen him today. So let me also call up Alhaji Alwan Hassan, Managing Director, Bank of Agriculture. Is there, Alhaji indicated he was going to be sending a representative. Is there? Mr. Kabir, maybe you could move. Is Professor Banji now online? So let's just save the time. I understand that Director Buba is here. Readily seized with sufficient information to anchor the ministry's concerns here.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. Perhaps we'll take 5 minutes. Good morning, everyone. You're welcome to the industrialization plenary. We will start first by, I will be your moderator for this. By my right, please. Introduce yourself.
Can you hear me now? Okay, right, okay. I'm Dr. Ted Ingo. Foodsab, they know our brands. We are manufacturers of Gino brand of products, Gino tomatoes, cubes, curry, thyme. We also do Bama mayonnaise, the largest you're familiar with in Nigeria, Bama, Jaguar, and Gino brands. Thank you.
I will introduce myself within the context of the most experienced person when it comes to implementation of e-wallet technology in agriculture. I was privileged, and that program went from Nigeria to Liberia and then even in Afghanistan. So for those who might not probably have seen somebody who's worked in Afghanistan.
Switch off yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ishak Ebuba. The department that is out. Thank you.
Here. I learned that Professor Banji is online now. Professor, please, can we have an introduction?
Agriculture and Rural Development. The department that is
Cannot hear him, he's muted.
You now, Prof, please help us with an introduction.
Oh, okay. All right. Good morning. Happy to join the meeting. And congratulations to Richard and all the organizers.
Thank you very much, Prof. So, Richard, are we still going to take you up on your offer to join us? Okay, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very interesting topic. It's also blessed with a human capacity, as well with the geography. Previous governments and industrialized agriculture to feed this country. The essence is for us to be food sufficient. However, the efforts have not provided the required results. However, of course, we know we're a large country of different sorts. So there can be a lot of reasons to this. In view of the above, the government now established what they call special agro-industrial processing zones, a government-enabled and private sector-led agro-industrialization program that seeks to develop agricultural infrastructure in agricultural potential locations around the country. As much to look at the benefit this new model is providing to this agriculture, to this country's agriculture. We have long yearned for diversification of our economy with agriculture. Is this model the answer to economic diversification? Are the private sector ready to join in this model? Is the country ready to look at agriculture not as a way of life, but as a business? So first, I would like to start with one of the core architectures of the SAPZ, Professor Banji. Prof, how do you see the model of industrialization, specifically SAPZ, benefiting this country's economy? And also, I understand you had worked with the UN. How do you see this supporting the UN SDG 1 and SDG 2? Zero poverty and zero hunger. Thank you, Prof.
No, thank you very much, Kabir. Thank you, fellow panelists. As the MC has introduced, the SAPZ had been established to address a number of those issues that he enumerated. The country is huge, but we lack all the basic infrastructure to ensure that the right value chains are realized. We lack infrastructure that links the rural to the urban areas. We tend to lack a number of the things that will help farmers. The key objective of the SAPC is to raise the efficiency of farming, of farmers in the, in the rural areas. The SAPC is specifically located within what we call peri-urban areas. That is intersection between rural and urban, and it's deliberate. It's an idea that tends to use these kinds of policy to realize the potential of the 34 million hectares of land that Nigeria has. We are still locked into subsistence farming, what the MC described as agriculture as a way of life, not as a business. In order for us to change that model, the SAPC was launched to raise productivity on farm, to raise skills of farmers, to transform that rural areas from what we always describe as zones of misery to zones of prosperity. So the building of capacity is extremely important, both in terms of capabilities of human beings and also the capacity of the ecosystem. So we are hoping, and we believe very strongly that what we have started in 8 zones of the country will lead to the zero hunger that we crave for in the United Nations SDGs. Nigeria has no business with poverty. The country should be feeding itself and to feed the whole of Africa. So the expected impact is that we're going to not just raise productivity, ensure huge employment, especially for young people and women, but also to raise living standard of our people. We hope that those zones will become zones of competitiveness, where we are going to be exporting a lot of our finished products. Because a main issue with the SAPC is that it's going to be a zone also of value addition. The configuration of the SAPC is such that you have 2 particular characteristics of this space. A zone is an agglomeration of actors, farmers, aggregators, factories, and then you have adjoining communities, maybe 20, 30, 40, 70 kilometers around those zones, around the hub, that we are going to build what we call agri transformation centers. Those centers are for me, one of the most critical actually, in terms of the transformation of the economy. Where we will ensure that farmers get cold rooms, all kinds of things that help farmers to preserve their goods, and then move them to the factory area. So this is the broad outline, secondary city. Because within that zone, you are going to have all manner of social services, you are going to have hospitals, schools, you are actually changing the profile of rural-urban migration. And we are hoping that in the end, we are going to have the reverse migration of people actually leaving the urban areas that are congested, leaving the slum situation where they are in, and move into the zones. As you probably hear more later, right now we have started with 8 states, 2 in the north, Kano, Kaduna, north central, Kwara, FCT. Southwest, you have Ogun and Oyo State, and in southeast with expression of interest. Our hope is that every state in Nigeria, in the next 5 years, will have an SAPC. So this is a huge undertaking, and we're inviting all relevant actors, investors, anchor investors, zone tenor of food, a Nigeria that is food secure, a Nigeria that have food sovereignty, rather than a country where we still have now 21% food inflation, and many people not being able to have 2 square meals. So this is our goal, and we hope that with this Feed Nigeria Summit, we'll be able to send this message to everyone concerned that Nigeria is open for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I would go back to the Director GB Foods. You have had the Prof. The essence of the SAPZ or the projection is for all states in the country to have an SAPZ. You have been doing what is somewhat as an SAPZ, as a mechanization. So first of all, how has your business supported the desire of the country for food sufficiency? How has your business supported any of the SDGs, collaborating with the SAPZ as they grow around the 36 states? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Yusuf, for that. GB Foods, I said one of our brands is Gino, Gino Tomatoes. We are the largest farmers of tomatoes in sub-Saharan Africa. We have the largest tomato farm and integrated factory anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is located in Kebbi. Our farm is about 1,500 hectares big. We have a processing plant that processes 500 metric tons of tomatoes a day. We are expanding that to 1,500. And that side, I've been having several conversations with the governor of Kebbi State about converting that site in southern Kebbi, which is in Gas. You are in charge of this SAPZ thing. We need to have a conversation about how you work assiduously with the next Kebbi governor to ensure that the next SAPZ is there. If not, you and I are going to have a conversation. I'm not threatening. But that aside, we have worked with farmers trying to train. We've trained over 5,000 farmers on how to farm tomatoes. These are farmers who had never, ever farmed tomatoes before. We worked with GIZ and put in our own money. We worked with Central Bank under the Anko Bora program to train these farmers. And sadly, not all of them actually came through. Some of them started the project and then dropped out. Because farming tomatoes is a very challenging thing. It's like, tomatoes is like more or less, is the equivalent of a poultry. The egg, the challenges you have with eggs is the same challenge you have with tomatoes. By the time you farm it, if I harvest and I don't process within, say, 15 hours, the tomatoes is bad and I can't use it. So with the casual workers, 80% of them are women. A good number of them had never worked anywhere. It's the first time they've earned a salary, and we pay them daily. So these farmers, this work to thank us that these people had never found themselves in such a situation. And when we did this project, there were a lot of communities around there that had never had clean drinking water. We went around to about 24 communities, hospital-grade drinking water, because by the time you go down that deep, you begin to get very clean water, and they had it for the first time, which improved health outcomes for mothers and children in that locality. So we now, when you buy our Gino tomatoes in the market, you're buying Gino tomatoes that actually has tomatoes grown in Nigeria. We are the only ones in the country that has that kind of a product. Now, so when you begin to think about this, so what are some of the challenges we have faced? I think one of the key challenges is that we've not been able to identify farmers who can work with us. Yes, we have our own farm. A lot of these farmers, when they come to get this Anko Bora money, they are not there for farming. They are there to siphon funds. You know, the sad truth is that a lot of our farmers, and I'm going to use very dramatic language, are gangsters. They will come, take this money, or take the fertilizers and go and sell and not do the work. And then those who actually farm, we agree, we had an off-take agreement. We signed a contract where prices are going up, they will side sell. And when market prices are coming down, they'll bring the product back to us. And sometimes they'll bring it back to us when it is deteriorating. That was grown for us. They were taking it to Niger Republic. So you cannot invest, millions, close to a project that costs almost $50 million of that nature, depending on people who will take your products and sell somewhere. So that's one other challenge. The other challenge we face when we're trying to implement this is that our farmers are it's a way of life. And they came to that way of life not out of destitution, not because this was something voluntary. So these people did not study agriculture. When I compare the farmers, we're the largest processors of tomato growers, are educated to degree level. All our outgrowers in Europe are millionaires in Europe. And our aspiration was to make our outgrowers in Nigeria millionaires, at least in Naira. And those that were committed and got committed to the project made good money, and they're very happy with the money. If you're going to do an SAPZ anywhere, the key challenge is security. And I think yesterday I didn't hear us talk enough about security. In March, we were ransacked by 400 bandits, 400 armed bandits who came on a motorbike. They were shut down for several months, and I've had to spend millions of dollars changing the security architecture of the site. Government have so many military people guarding a farm. I have been to Senegal. We went up to St. Louis, near the Mauritania border. They have a 40,000 hectare irrigation scheme. When you drive from Dakar to that place, 4.5 hours drive, the roads are tarred. You don't need any security man to escort you there. When you go there, the community is welcoming. Nobody attacks you. There are Japanese working there who have never, ever seen a military man. You go to Ghana. When we were trying to do the same project in Ghana, we drove from Temale to Poualougu, which is at the border of Burkina Faso. No military escort. I was with expatriates. Our car broke down at 9 p.m. at night. No challenges. We're not afraid. You go to Thailand, you drive out of Bangkok, 4 hours into the country. The roads and infrastructure are good. So these things, as noble as they are, if farm access roads, farmers could not bring tomatoes to me, when even the ones who are committed, because there were no roads for them to do it. I'm besides a dam, Kainji Dam, but I don't have regular power. A road that should take me 30 minutes to drive, it takes me 2 hours to drive. So my farmers, I have to build a hotel inside my farm premises to accommodate people. So if these infrastructure challenges are not addressed, SAPZ, yes, they have all these intentions of having power, roads, etc. It is good on paper, but we need to make sure that these things we say we need to do to ensure these things happen are put in place. Step one, once you say, okay, SAPZ is here, number two is, what infrastructure do I have? And for people like us who have gone and built a semi-industrial zone, like we have done, that is a ready-made area to come and create a success story. So if you go to Kebbi and you're trying to create something new, it'll be a struggle. This is something where if you have an SAPZ for horticulture in southern Kebbi, in one of the poorest areas in that place, where children go to school without teachers, etc. I think I've spoken a lot. I shouldn't hog the microphone for too long. But you understand the sort of challenges we have ahead of us. You know, it's a noble idea, but we need to do a lot of work to get it off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. So, and they build in collaboration with government. As it is now, SAPZ is a $541 million base project, loan, or to say payable. But of course, I haven't seen GB Foods, but I am sure such areas for the SAPZ as has been done in the first 8 states of the SAPZ. And at least it's good. I'm happy that you outgrow SDGs, at least. Now, back to the government. Director, you've heard the private sector and their challenges. The first challenge is having responsible farmers. As they mentioned, most of their farmers are somewhat of gangsters. And there's insecurity in the issue in the country. Of course, it's a huge issue that we're possibly not technically equipped to discuss, and is a larger issue that the government is assiduously working to sort out. Support for farmers to enable them collaborate with such business, and importantly, you deploy them in such private areas. So specifically, we would like to know 2 questions. What are you doing as the Ministry of Agriculture to have sanitized data of farmers, given that you do have agro-rangers? Director, please.
Thank you, Moderator. Nigeria, because it's the basis for development, because every sector in Nigeria depends on agriculture. So the policies in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture has been made in such a way, and the key drivers in the agricultural sector are the farmers. And farmers are classified into smallholder, medium scale, and those in the crop subsector, those in the animal, those in the fishery subsector, in order to know where they are, what are their needs, because input gives out output. We ensure that the fertilizer that is being sold and other critical input to farmers in Nigeria of not only of quantity but also of quality. You can have 20 bags of low quality and some direction to ensure that the input that is being sold or produced in Nigeria meet the required set standard is come out with a legal framework, that is the National Fertilizer Quality Control Act and Regulation, to ensure that any fertilizer that is being produced in Nigeria meet the required set standard. We made mention of what are we cover. Do we have a database of farmers? It's not only the farmers. We have a developed national fertilizer management platform to capture the input producers, the input distributors, and the input users. What we are trying, even though we are not there yet, what we are trying to do is that we want to know the type of input that is being produced in Nigeria, because they are the people that are going to be very closer to the farmers, who also establish their database, and the farmers that are going to use this. Farmers, as critical as they are, they also exhibit certain characteristics as earlier mentioned by the earlier discussant. Because one, when we are doing our e-wallet system, at the review what has gone well, what has not gone well, and what has been observed to have not been going well, and what are the remedial action. One of the observations we made is that whatever you do to some farmers, you will analyze. The farmers are also very intelligent. They will say, okay, I'm being supported with also 5 bags, and it costs also amount. So if I look at the end, if I sell this input, I will get the amount more than the input I'm going to use on my farm, because there is no guarantee that I'm going to get at the end of my production season the amount of money I'm going to get by selling this input directly to another person. So what the ministry is doing is that to have the database of these farmers, so that we know that at any point the farmer is buying or being supported with an input, we know the farmer, we know the location of the farmer, and we'll be able to measure the output from that his farm, so that we'll be able to say whether he has judiciously used the input or not. In terms of security, when the National Fertilizer Quality Control Act was signed into law, as soon as we start implementation, we contacted all the security agencies in Nigeria, the police, the civil defense, the army, the navy, the air force, believe the custom, the immigration, the prison, the EFCC, the ICPC. So we are working as a team with them to ensure that wherever we have security challenges, we will be able to contact. They have already established desks in all the formations, internal affairs, that's the interior, to bring on board the Civil Defense Corps, so that they can be able to be available, train them, provided them with resources to establish the agro rangers, whereby at any place we have security challenges, where the farmers are being threatened or what have you, they can be able to give them adequate security, even though the number is not yet there. But we are trying to build on the sectors that have been established so far. So the ministry is doing a lot in all areas to ensure that the farmers are secured, the produce are secured, and everything that is going on in the system is well coordinated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. These are laudable achievements by the ministry. So this takes me to the Chairman, Vorian Coyle. You've heard what the ministry is doing in terms of farmer database, the acts they have. So as a technology provider, and as you mentioned, that you have vast experience in the e-wallet that has been conducted by the country. So what are you doing now in terms of facilitating industrialization, importantly, food sufficiency for the country? Thank you.
And thank you very much, Kabiru, and thank you very much to the other speakers. I think I'll frame my thoughts in a number of ways. One is to respond to the question you asked when you were doing your introduction, which is, will this model, will it work? And my view is that the model will work. And the model will work if we connect all the dots together. And connecting the dots together is where technology systems comes into play. When you spoke about the trust problem with farmers. You spoke about the security problem. I will introduce the philosophy of industrialization. Our country must see the idea of industrialization as a philosophy and as a culture. These two things are very important. If our Ministry for National Orientation does not build a culture that industrialization is the key to national transformation, the problem of security will not disappear. Because all over the world, this model has been done and it has been successful. But it was successful because people at the grassroots and every level understood that this is for us. It is for our people. So from the technology standpoint, what are we doing? We're introducing a concept into agriculture, courtesy of some development partners in the next few weeks. We call it the Agriculture Digital Business Profile. Because we kind of realize that as long as you continue to think of the farmer as a farmer, the farmer's mind doesn't change. We now need to use technology structures to get the farmer to start thinking of himself as a business. Now, if the farmers are illiterate in remote areas, how do you now help them to make that leap? And that's where the work the ministry is doing in terms of databases is coming into play. We are now combining all these data sets together to create a digital profile for the farmer and linking that profile to various community systems to build trust. So that when a farmer takes money from you to farm, you have the confidence that that farmer is really, really going to farm and not run away. And then using that now to now connect it to markets. And markets now are now industrialists like yourself. So that the farmer himself too can have assurance that when I cultivate, I will get paid on time. Because at times, the reason why farmers behave a certain way is because when the farmer cultivates, the guy is not sure he will get paid. And this farmer has school fees to pay. His natural reaction is to just say, let me sell to the nearest person that can pay me fast. So we're using a technology to solve the problem of business orientation so that the farmer can see himself as a business. He has a national business profile. That profile is available to anybody in the country and beyond the country. That profile allows him to access capital, and it allows, let me call it micro deal rooms. We've got Feed Nigeria Summit deal room, but at the grassroots level, we need micro deal room. So I kind of believe that if technology with the work government is doing, the work private sector is done, are brought together in a very clever way, the work that AFAN is doing, we can bring this skill that at times, you can also think of Nigeria like America. People will say America will always do the right thing in the long run. Nigeria also is also like that. Nigeria will always do the right thing in the long run. And I think we are now at the end of the journey. I simply believe that if we do the right thing over the next 10 years, the Nigeria we will see will be very, very different. Because we should remember that China in 1980 was a backwater. And nobody wanted the Chinese television in 1980. Nobody wanted a Japanese television. If they brought you a Japanese TV and they saw Sanyo or Philips, you're going to say, I don't want that. Give me Philips. But today, all of us are using Chinese TV, Japanese things. 20% of the population of China, if not even higher than the percentage-wise. So question is, if they can do it in Asia, we can do it in Nigeria. Because we have an advantage here. Despite our issues, a lot of our people are educated. And I'll quote the statistics. A lot of time, people think that Nigerian farmers are not educated. The question is, what is the meaning of education? Because if you think of education from the Western paradigm, that education means you can speak English, then we will say everybody is not educated. But if you start thinking of education, that what is the level of schooling that our farmers have? At least in the National Farmer Database, and I'm sure that's the statistics that Buba is seeing, there was another 17% that was educated up to university level. And then when you now look at literacy, how many of the farmers can read and write? That could read Ajami, that could read Yoruba, that could read Hausa. The number changes. It changes to as high as 70%. So the question is, illiterate. They are literate in our local language. Can we now change the paradigm of how we deliver knowledge to them? So my closing comment would be, we need to move away from the Western paradigm and create what I will call the Nigerian paradigm for transformation. And I believe the work the ministry is doing is to create that paradigm. Those will be my contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bolaji. I think you're right. The earlier we start looking and solving problems according to our peculiar circumstances, both even the ministry and especially the private sector. However, I think there is a gap in terms of marketing and linkages. And this brings me to the organizers or the organizer of Feed Nigeria Summit, Mr. Richard. You've heard Mr. Bolaji. You've heard the technologies they're providing, which will provide a problem-solving opportunity for the private sector. So how is Food Nigeria Summit, linking these developers and the private sector kingdom in the tune of 95 million pounds for support in terms of climate smart and adaptation opportunities. So how is Feed Nigeria trying to market this? How are they linking it up with the private sector and the Nigerian population? And how do you intend to do things better going forward?
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Kabir. So the essence of even this convocation is basically tilted in that direction, just trying to bring, a coterie of players in the engagements, basically tailored towards ensuring that the critical concerns in the ecosystem are tabled, value, propositions are arrived at, to be able to ensure that the sectoral players understand what the opportunity role play they have in the mix, and the should I say the bulk of the benefits. I'm so sorry. So they understand, once we have a clear position where they understand what their value is in the mix, and the emphasis and importance that government places on what they're doing, they're able to relate with that and engage government better. Also, we're looking at, projecting the capabilities of the sector. We're already working to project also the energies that the sector is pulling together corporately, bringing all of the private sector players, uniformly together. It's really about, collective bargaining in terms of relation of not much of the values that are and the expectations on the part of the private sector have been realized, and so we're looking to begin to do things differently. So that engagement needs to happen, and that's why this process is set up. But beyond that, we're looking also at changing the mindset of the private sector. It's not, like you said, it's not about agriculture for the sake of agriculture. It's agriculture from the standpoint of business that you're faced with, and then you're able to also look at the possibilities of the opportunities that even the challenges you seemingly have, can the opportunities that those challenges can throw up, in trying to put forward, a clear pathway to profit, that you would understand what challenges exist, on the pathway. I take GB Foods, for instance. Without a doubt, they've had this security challenge, and I can tell you from a private sector standpoint that they would have taken steps and measures to try to, ensure that that doesn't happen subsequently. They might not tell you give you the full details, but if I know the private sector, they would have gone on, to take measures to forestall subsequent happenings. Beyond that, we're trying as much as possible to get stakeholders together, the British government you just mentioned, and articulating a clear message that Nigeria, private and public sector, are open to do business. We want to be able to engage globally and negotiate opportunities for those of our stakeholders who are engaging in productivity activities, particularly in the evening. I made that point. The British government is interested in Nigeria, not necessarily because Nigeria is they are charitable organizations or they like Nigeria per se. It's about the fact that there is, a business case. They are out of the EU. Now they are on their own, so to speak, but they want to have partners, that they can engage with across the world. And primarily speaking, you work with partners that you have a history with, you understand them. And for us, we are, we have a history with the UK. So that already throws up an opportunity. If we don't capitalize on it, if we don't seize it, clearly, and when I hear some colleagues say, "Oh, they are handing us this thing and we can produce ourselves," why are we not producing for our own local, economy or market? Why are we projecting towards the UK market as such? The reality is that the fundamentals are such that trading with the UK gets you immediate and medium-term benefits that outweigh, what you would gain locally. And so understanding all of this is critical. That's why even the deal room is set up, so that players who have the resources, who are looking for where to invest, can have a structured opportunity wherein they can engage with, the suppliers of services, suppliers of the would-be, will I say, productivity content to what they require. I'll give you an instance about the Afan Tingo transaction. I mean, Tingo, that primarily, if you're engaging with farmers, you would have the problems that GB was just talking about, ordinarily. Their structural coordination in terms of their ability to adhere to contracts, responsibilities posed by contracts, and what have you. But now you have a farmer organization that superintends over their activities, understands its membership, has the database, and is engaging with them on a day-to-day basis. So they would have a better feel and understanding of the ecosystem. And so resources given to them, you can be sure that to a large extent, it gets to the right kind of people to generate the kind of output that you require, and that they have a stake in it. Because most of the time, an understanding on the part of the farmers that there is a stake in this for them is critical. If they know that this is how they're going to make their ends meet, and they are properly sensitized around, it's not just about saying, okay, I've given them money so they should understand this. It is about speaking to them in the language they understand and making them become part of that process. The people who can speak to them the best way they will understand are their managers over the years. So that's why Tingo went in that direction. If we can change the paradigm, the thinking from the investment standpoint, into understanding that, look, this sector, if you know how to manage your own fields as it were, largely notional. It is a risk perception, like they would say, from the NERSAL side of things. Most of the time, agriculture is perceived to be risky. That perception sometimes just is fallacious or a myth. Until you drill through and you drill in and you do things right, it continues to be that way. So in all, the Feed Nigeria Summit process is a process that is majorly primed to provide, a platform for achieving the 133 million is a number that keeps haunting me, since the day I heard it. 133 million Nigerians are poor, and that is a fact that was put forward by our own, National Bureau of Statistics. So it means that we have a whole lot of work to do, and it's a state of emergency, really speaking. So in a state of emergency, you send in the guys that the National Guard, and things happen differently, and that's what we're trying to do with the Feed Nigeria Summit process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Richa. Thank you very much. I don't know if Prof is still on that. You've heard what has been said by GB Foods, what has been said by the ministry, the technology providers, and the Feed Nigeria, which means they're really partners galvanizing around industrialization of agriculture in the country. However, point of view, what is the bank doing as the pioneers of architecture in terms of SAPZ in the country? What is the bank doing to guarantee investment from different partners in and outside the country? And what is the bank doing to de-risk the agriculture or the culture in terms of putting in processes and procedures in the development of SAPZ? Yes, we're behind time, So, Prof, if you could help us explain this in about 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kabir. So from what I hear, from what we know already, we have who bring financing. Second challenge is operation and implementation, which is all tied to, again, having the best contractors, managers, and so forth. The third are institutional issues like the framework that we need. And the last, of course, political and security issues. From what I was just trying to sort of look at all of the things that the speakers have been raising. In the bank, as you know, we are in 18 countries already. Right now, we are looking at the best way to actually, and I'll mention one or two things. One is an alliance that we're already proposing. Is still in the preliminary stages to be able to raise huge amounts of money in a way that will be supporting each of these countries. And in a place like Nigeria, for example, you have multiple zones in many other countries. So we have different challenges. The kinds of money that we've raised in Nigeria is unable to. We try to find partners that will bring their own equity. As I said, that's the first challenge. A partner that will bring his own equity. Say you take one state, for example, say Kebbi that you were mentioned. The bank gives 40 million as a catalytic funding. But that catalytic funding is configured in a way to attract another equity partner. So that equity partner comes and say, for every 40 million dollars, we match with 40 million. Or in the most ideal case, what we are actually pushing for is that equity partner, the private-driven model, will own the zone, because we don't believe government should be running business. Government don't run business well. So that's one thing. The second criteria that we require in this equity partner is that it is a company that has a global reach, that can attract anchor and also zone tenants. So you find it's no news anymore that you find, for example, in Ogun State, Arise, which is a consortium of AFC, African Finance Corporation, and of that zone. Knowledge. The model that we bring together, this SAP is a very powerful model. So that's what we want to do across all the zones. And once we are able to demonstrate this success, as we are starting now, we are hoping, and Kabil, who is the MC today, is been charged with this, and I'm going to be holding you by the neck to ensure that by Q1 of next year, we have here, and it's going to take 18 months, going to be completed. So the peculiar problem we have in Nigeria includes, most importantly, rich Nigerians. If we are able to advocate enough and explain to them the benefits, there are people who can build their own zones. This is ultimately what we want. We want individuals, like GB Farm, for example, we can convert the Kebbi place into a zone. We have had offers from others, I don't want to mention names, who have said, look, we have operations in all of these states. We have key actors that we would then catalyze with knowledge, with information, and with, of course, where we are going to raise a big fund for the SAPCs all across Africa, not just in Nigeria. If we demonstrate success of a few states, we won't be able to catch up. I've actually been encouraged by what has happened, say, in a place like Ogun, and we believe other states are going to be following suit. I agree with our colleague from GB Farm. We need to deal with the security issue, and I believe we are going to deal with it. Nigeria has the resilience to using this special agro-industrial processing zones. Thank you.
Please, a round of applause for the Prof. Thank you. But you have seen, or you have heard what has been discussed, and the move the government is doing with its partners towards industrializing the country, towards changing agricultural view from a way of life to a business. The main underscoring of this session is to ascertain whether this model is going to work, whether this model is different from what has been done previously, So I would like to take at least 3 questions from the audience. Starting with the gentleman that raised his hand first, that in blue. And please, someone give him the mic, and if you can please stand up. The gentleman in blue. Madam, I'll come to you after him.
Thank you so much, Professor and every other contributors. My first question is to ask to make most of these SAPCs to work. SAPCs beyond infrastructure. We need content. We are still in the era where NEPC will celebrate the high quantity of RCN exported from Nigeria, while processors of cashew are struggling to meet domestic quota for processing. So if we are processing and we are competing with exporters of these same raw materials, then competing for companies that are operating in the zone and possibly outside the zone. My second question is, possibly if we can hear from the Prof, if there are ongoing or existing collaborations or intervention or support for people who are actually willing to set up private processing zones. Like the Prof also mentioned, the government is not the best runner of businesses. So private sector really need to set up, not just set up, but own processing zones that can actually key into the African or regional value chain that the SAPC set out to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof, perhaps if you can note it down, we'll take all the questions first and then we start to answer it. But just to shed more light on it, there's an SAPC policy already undergoing. So the next question from Madame, please, if you can give her the mic.
I like to stand on the existing protocols. My name is Halima Injabdi. I'm coming from the Farmers Group, All Farmers Association of Nigeria. I am now the Regional Director of Let Us Give Agriculture a Voice, known as Lugabo. My question is, the Federal Minister of Agriculture has been known for its inconsistent policies. And with all I've heard yesterday, it's a good one, but how do we package this and then meet the incoming administration? That is one. Number two, we have a whole line of investors who want to invest in agriculture. What are the insurance and backup for the funds that come into the country? They come in with money, they want to take their profits and interest back to their country. What are the strategies put in place?
Thank you very much. Even though this is a bit digressed from what has been discussed, industrialization and the penalty is a bit dynamic by calling one of the directors of the ministry on board to sit here to answer this question. Director of PNPC, Mr. Tanimu, please, if you can come to the stage. Yes. So the director would be addressing the Madame's question because it's a policy question, a bit digressed from what has been discussed, but I think perhaps for the sake of the audience, we should have all the questions answered. So the next question goes to the gentleman with the glasses, Ilyasun, please.
Dr. Kabir, I was just going to make the point that the director had declined earlier to sit up there, so now you have pulled him up.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I would like to appreciate the effort of African Seed Association of Nigeria. Like I was saying, I would want to begin by appreciating the effort of AFDB as well as Federal Ministry of Agriculture in championing this SAP, because it's a good step at the right time. My question is, what are the mechanisms in making upstream sector of agriculture very much involved in SAPZ? Because we are talking about agro-processing zone. We are talking about enhancing processing, adding value, export, and the rest. What is the mechanism put in place to incorporate the upstream sector of the agricultural value chain as a key driver of this SAP? Because we are struggling very much across all commodity with issue of productivity, with issue of output per hectare, issue of adoption to GAV, what have you. So I think we should begin to talk about production as a first step in promoting our agricultural value, rather than focusing more on processing or rather export. So I would like to know from the side of the ministry as well as the FD, the involvement, the magnitude of involvement of upstream sector.
Thank you very much. We'll just take one more question and then we'll start the answer. I think, yes, the lady, let's be gender sensitive.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Victoria Abigail, a member of faculty from Bowen University, Iwo. Yes, one of the speakers spoke about the issue of insecurity. And I just want to know what are measures to bring about awareness, sensitization to we, because most of us don't want to go into the farm because of that. I also have an experience with my younger brother who studied agric, and after graduation, my dad encouraged him to go into farming, which he did. But of course, this issue of insecurity didn't make him succeed in it. He has abandoned that and gone into IT. And most of my students, of course, when you're discussing issues of agric, that is the number one thing that comes to their mind. So if government is really tackling this issue, what are examples to tell us, to make us know that truly this issue is being tackled? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think as well on private sector participation, I think that goes to Prof. The third question is on consistent policy in agriculture and overarching policy. I think that question would go to the Director, PNPC. Another question on upstream agricultural production, as you have answered some of the activities the ministry is doing in terms of security, and I feel the Director, PNPC, can also add on that. So before I give the mic to the Prof, just to give a light, shed more light on SAPZ with regards to upstream production. Now, the SAPZ in each state is divided into two components: the Agricultural Transformation Center, which is a stretch of farmlands that the SAPZ supports the farmers with mechanization, production drivers, and all sorts of technology to be able to produce in economic quantities to feed into the agricultural industrial hubs, which are known as the processing zones. So, but there's few questions that has been asked by the audience. Prof, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you so much. I think three very quick answers. One is the policies to disincentivize the export of raw materials. I know about this particular issue. I know, for example, that the cashew people have been speaking out about it. And I think, Kabir, we need some advocacy with the Ministry of Industry and Investment to get this on board. There's an old statute that actually bans export and processing of cassava and a whole range of products. I think that was done to ensure food security at some point, but that particular policy is no more, for me, tenable. And I know the ministry has been trying to work on it. I can send you the particular document that was shared with me. And I think we need to really assist those who want to process. I believe it will be the same for sesame, for any other of the processors. Cassava and a couple of commodities. So I think we need to take that up and I think the speaker is correct to seek assistance on this. Number two is the policy to support private SAPZs. This is the ultimate. This is where, in Ethiopia, they have 24 industrial zones right now. Half of them are private. About 12 or 13 are private. How did that happen? It happened when these private people with money begin to see the benefits that come from especially people who have the financial strength. You can approach us. We'll be very happy to begin to work with you. In fact, there are two major of our Nigerian big agribusiness people now that we're already talking to. We met at the African Investment Forum, and I actually pushed them. And they said, yeah, why not? We'll do it. There's one in the south, and there's one in the north. I'm not going to mention names here for confidentiality, but this is the direction we should be going. Nigeria is a vast country, and I believe that, in fact, associations, if I may, Sesame Group, the Cocoa Group, whoever, driven by maybe 2 or 3 anchor investors, and establish the zone. And then we'll come there to support them. Once you identify the location, our role is to come there and then do all the due diligence. And then we convert you also. And if you have, for example, some stranded assets in any of the any parts of our country that is crying out to be rejuvenated, I think those are potential sites that we can also use to change into an SAPZ. So please, let's think about it. I'm just thinking out of the box as we are speaking. And I believe that, like I said, I believe strongly that this model is going to cause a revolution for us. Finally, Elias, you were asking, how do we encourage upstream? I think Kabir has explained a little bit more. The focus, they are things that we are taking extremely seriously. The major distinction, the uniqueness of an SAP beside a port or beside an airport, that's one model. You could just put it beside a port, import the internet and re-export. And this is why we should improve the lives and living standards of those folks in the rural communities. So the ATCs are set up to do exactly that. And we're going to be helping them both with knowledge, training, inputs, seeds, fertilizers, mechanization, and all that is necessary to raise and what I call to move them up the value chain in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, in terms of technology. Thank you very much.
A round of applause for the Prof, please. Thank you very much, Prof. So with all this that the bank is doing, I think this brings us back to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. Director PNPC, a question was asked on consistency of policy in the ministry, and is there any overarching policy, or are there changes in the way of how the ministry is now?
Hello? Good morning, development. Unfortunately, the person who raised the question about the policy inconsistency has decided to leave the hall. Now, over the years, the agri policy has been consistent. Let me take you back to the last two. We built on the success of the ATA to develop the green alternative, that is APP. Immediately APP winded off, we now develop a new successor policy, which is called NATIP, National Agricultural Technology Innovation Policy. I'm parcel of the new policy that we developed, because it was the first time the policy that was developed, it took cognizance of farmers at the grassroots who made input and all the relevant stakeholders. Take note of the fact that, and we make sure that it even goes beyond that point. It goes to the National Assembly, where the National Assembly made input. At a point, the National Assembly was of the view that this policy, native policy, should be subjected to legislative process so that it becomes a legal policy. With the fear that so the incoming government is going to inherit this policy and drive it. So it's not likely the fears that are being expressed by other quarters that the policy might be disrupted or there will be any changes, not likely, except that with the dynamics of the system, there may be some amendments to accommodate new challenges or new ways that will come in. As regard to the question of the insurance, for the first time, this government has provided so many enabling environments to guarantee investors agri investment. There are so many presidential executive orders and other initiatives. Even the Native is Safe has helped to transform the Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation to give farmers who have registered and their farms and investments have been certified, they are insured against any eventuality that may come up. So our advocacy at the ministry's level now is to ensure that farmers, through the Farmers Association, get knowledge on how to get their farms and farm investment insured against any eventuality. I hope I have answered the question. Thank you very much.
Okay. The President, Afan, please. Mark, even though the President, Mr. President, I hope you know that Prof has charged you with developing an SAPZ. You're the President of different associations.
We'll do that. I just want to commend the efforts of the Director, but I have something to add there. What we are talking about is that not only policies like ATAPs and so on, there are federal government interventions that whenever we have interventions, we want it to be as policies. Yesterday I said it in my speech that, like, for instance, the Anko Borua. Is it consistent? Can somebody tell me now that no government will come and abolish it? Where is GES? Is it not a very laudable program? Where is WIT accelerated program? Where is Feed Nigeria Summit? Feed the Few, what do you call it? The Obasanjo's Operation Feed the Nation. Where is it? Those are the inconsistent things that we are talking about. And when they come, we want something. That is what we are talking about, Director. Not those. We know that federal government is. We are with the federal Ministry of Agric, and we want all these kind of things to come through Federal Ministry of Agric, so that we can make it a policy there, like ATAPs that you're talking about. But all governments will come and pump in large amount of money there. That is why, like also what my other colleague was saying, when Richard answered him, that what the Feed Nigeria Summit is doing here is bringing a platform where they can expose the private sector, that is the investors, and we, the primary actors. We come together, we see ourselves. We are not just going to fold up the Feed Nigeria Summit and go just like a chumburi. I had something with the narratives. We want to change the system. We want to take over the affairs of agribusiness into our own hands. We want you, the ministry, to give us a platform, a cover, that wherever we are operating, you are guiding us and so on. But we want to take the steering. That is what we mean. That is what Feed Nigeria Summit is trying to achieve. That is why we have to be with them in making it happen this year. So these are the kind of interventions, policies that we are talking about. You understand? But those policies, we believe, yes, they are there, and nobody is going to change them because they are at the Federal Ministry of Agric. But we don't want a policy whereby large amount of money will come and be pumped, and then after it, nobody cares again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. However, I believe you did mention some very important things, such as the e-wallet system. I think the ministry had revitalized that as a matter of presidential directive. They did even make it better. I believe maybe, Director, you shed more light on the NAGs and what has been done.
Thank you very much. Not to digress from what the Afghan president said, what I want him to understand is that agriculture is on the concurrent list. It's not just the federal government that is doing agriculture. So most of the interventions he brought, they are programs, they are really not a policy. And these are programs that are supposed to fast-track agricultural development. Of course, CBN brought this Anchor Borrowers program to fast-track production and to encourage the youth to get into agricultural programs. So if you look at the holistically, you see there are some states, governments, that are not even inclined to agriculture. There are individuals that are not inclined to agriculture. However, for the first time, you have a government that has an interest in agriculture, and it has invested and has opened the windows for them, because they are supposed to stimulate the economy. For the first time in this administration, it was the agri sector that brought out the country out of recession for 3 occasions. So it's a credit, which means we are doing well. We need to improve on what we have been doing. I hope I have made some sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So this takes us to the last question on insecurity. Maybe Director Fertilizer, you can shed more light on what the government is doing, and you can be supported by the Director Policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you, our audience. First and foremost, before we talk about the issue of security, there's an issue on upstream support to farmers. That's when we talk about upstream, we talk about production. The federal government has put a lot of incentives in place to ensure that all the required input that we need to support agricultural production in Nigeria is there. Talk about fertilizer, as we have said before. In the time past, before 2016, we have only 4 fertilizer blending plants in Nigeria that are active. Today, we have over 100 blending plants that are active and are producing a lot of specific and crop-specific formulation across the zone. Most of the plants are being cited and producing products are specific to those areas so that we have started having people establishing agrochemical plant in Nigeria, which was not there before. We have also analyzed our specific requirement in terms of the fertilizer. As you know, we have inorganic fertilizer, we have organic fertilizer, we have biofertilizers. Venture into agriculture in any space will have the required input to support him in Nigeria. That is why we have also a legal framework to ensure that those that are going to produce the input are producing it within the agreed framework. We are doing it in conjunction with West Africa, whereby product produced in Nigeria, particular fertilizers or any other thing produced in Nigeria, is acceptable across West Africa. As you know, Nigeria has the advantage of having the natural resources that is abundant, that has advantage over all African, particularly West African states. So we have positioned the inputs of sector to be able to meet our need and even excess. Urea plant, what they are producing is in excess of our requirements. However, I agree with them at a ratio that will be used for local consumption. I've been promoting the use of local resources that is available and abundant in Nigeria to teach the farmer how to utilize them so that instead of relying on inorganic fertilizer, they can be able to use that, and we are going to be continue with it. And in addition to that, no longer in use in Nigeria, we are also developing our indigenous ones so that we can be able to produce our agriculture in a safe environment. Talking about security, as I said earlier, the implementation of our act and the regulation are in conjunction with the security cycle under the coordination of the Office of the National Security Advisor. It has deployed all the mean environment, both in input and those that will be using the input to produce. If you can remember, in the Northeast, it became very difficult to produce farmers to go to the parks before, but now the product, particularly urea and dry blend NPKs, has been restricted for use in the Northeast. But because of the intervention and working relationship with the Office of Security Advisor, we have developed alternatives, and the farmers are back on their farms. So we, in addition to being in the upstream security cycle, the Nigeria Civil Defense, a section of them has been trained to protect the farmer, that's the agro rangers. And if you go to the Federal Ministry of Agri today and all our formation, you'll be seeing them with special kits. They are there at any time there is a security challenges, people can phone in, draw their attention, or draw the ministry is doing a lot. And we have created a lot of platform where people can link up with our services or with our intervention. The GS scheme has been reformed and renamed Agro Pocket, and it is working. The minister has brought it back. Very soon it will be on board, and you will see it has been reformed. All the loopholes that have been observed in the previous program has been addressed, and very soon it will come on board. Particularly, there are some states that have been selected for piloting. After the successful implementation, it will be upscaled to all the 36 states of the Federation and FCT Abuja. Thank you very much.
Round of applause for the director, please. Thank you very much, Director. Audience, we have heard what the ministry is doing to promote domestic production and standards to enhance trade. On that note, I would like to charge, as we come to the close, the Fit Nigeria Summit organizers. We have heard a lot the ministry is doing, a lot the private sector is doing, but I don't think it is enough to just wrap up and leave this very laudable event without Fit Nigeria collating all these activities, authenticating them, and putting them out on the website for our audience, for the larger country to try to participate and to gain value out of it. So I think this is a very, very important conducting after this very important and laudable summit. As we, would you like to say something?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Kabir. The fundamental set out, the structures to engage both ways, public and private sector wise, and also we have the mechanism for engaging the very in your face, as it were. Speaking about the core ethos of this activity. And we do have a very virile, mechanism for engaging entity. So I think that the takeaway from the conversations that we've had so far is that there is a lot of awareness, there's commitment on the part of stakeholders, and there is also the enthusiasm now, to move forward together. That partnership, that cohesive, engagement is what we at the level of the Feed Nigeria Summit actually set out to achieve. And I'm very happy that is beginning, to show. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. So as we come to the close of this session, I'll please like a round of applause for at least our members. Thank you. Well, yes. Well, GB Food would like to say one more thing. Perhaps all of you are going back with a box of tomato.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. No, I just want to add 2 or 3 things. Economic Summit Group, which looks at the greater economy. I think the Feed Nigeria Summit needs to have some kind of a round table that meets probably quarterly to tease out some of these issues, because we can't be doing this annually and stuff. We need to be sitting down and engaging on a quarterly basis and looking at things almost real time, so that we can ensure that we truly feed Nigeria. At the meeting, we need to have somebody from security. And at the next summit, Richard, it would be nice if we have a panel on security. If security is not in place, nobody will be fed in this country. Farms will be abandoned, and nobody will go to the farm. And if nobody is to the farm, we'll begin to import food. We now realize that there's imported gari from China, imported gari from India and Nigeria. And we'll get to a point where even pounded yams will be imported from China and India. And we'll get to that point, and it's cheaper to import from China or India than here. We'll be talking about how we create policies to ban, and that is not where we want to be. So we need to create self-sufficiency so we can export. And finally, on the SAPZ thing, and I'm putting this to the African Development Bank and to you, Yusuf, and stuff. We are in an area where we can the largest single integrated farm and factory anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa doing tomatoes can be done. This thing started with SCPZ, case study, that we can show that when we work, if we now have a processor, so anybody around us who can grow tomatoes will process, right? Because we have a very large factory. So how do we now work with the SCPZ thing to ensure that the infrastructure, all the other things that are required to make it succeed is there? Because all the other ones are about to start. We already have the key ingredient, the processing plant, a factory, farm, know how to disseminate to the farmers. The only thing missing is the infrastructure that makes the SAPZ work. Come, let's have a conversation. So that next year at the same time, we'll be having a flagship, we'll be doing videos about how the SAPZ was successful in Nigeria. This will be good for you, for Nigeria, and for the Africa Development Bank. So, Prof, if you can hear me, let's talk and make sure this thing works. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, GB Foods. We will make it a point to ensure that we engage with you as we come to the close of this occasion. Let's please have another round of applause for our panel members. Thank you very much. God bless this country. I think we may all go back to our seats.
We try to make. Thank you very much. That was an interesting session, to say the least, indicative of where things are going in the agricultural ecosystem. A lot of confidence, a lot of, will I say, clarity has been brought to bear on what government is doing, how it is actuated in doing what it is doing. I want to very quickly member or stakeholder in the agricultural ecosystem. I'm talking of none other than Senator Bello Gada. He is representing the Board of Trustees of the All Farmers Association of Nigeria. Senator Gada is a former Minister of Tourism and now the chairman of the Federal Public Complaints Commission. We are honored to have you in our midst. Thank you. Association of Nigeria, NACOTAN, Mr. Anibe Asumuga. He also had worked in at some point. Achumuga. Achimugu. Not Ga. Very well. All right. Yes, I agree. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving straight to the next set of activities. At this point, I want to call up the next session, which is basically going to still continue the trend of very interesting conversations around, agriculture. And I must say that the issue of security, important, critical to productivity as it is, just across of me here, of us here, there was a regional summit on the header farmer crisis and how to resolve the conflicts between the two parties. And I think that at the core of the security challenge that we have in the country is that which basically triggers much of the challenges that our farmers have in going to their farmsteads when they're supposed to. So the government is really doing something about it, is my point. There's engagement ongoing, and we can expect that in the near future, things will pan out better for us who are involved in primary productivity. I'd like to just introduce the panel for the next session. Next session is the transforming farm productivity through innovation and research. The first discussant on this panel is none other than Professor Murtala Sagagi. Professor Sagagi is from the Dangote Business School of the Bayero University, Kano. I want to say that this man, Professor Sagagi, is, rightly speaking, the brain behind the National Agricultural legislated into an act of the National Assembly to secure, or to provide a framework for developing agriculture in this country. And if you look at the content of the NATIP, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the underpinning, the message behind the policy, it says technology and innovation plan, ordinarily, and it subsumes it within an agriculture development, plan. And that tells you that the framers of this policy knew for a fact that if agriculture is to cheat nature, if we are to produce food for a rising population effectively, in the light of the challenges that we have today across board, in which you're asked to produce more food, but you're also warned that the environment needs to be, kept, sane, as it were, then you know that the framers had understood all of that and were even proactive in setting out the policies the way they are. So, Professor Sagagi, we recognize you. We also expect quite a number of, ideas coming from you in the course of this session. Mr. Andrew Blanche, CEO, Alvin Blanche Limited. I think he's supposed to project virtually. Is he here? I saw Alvin Blanche. Alvin Blanche is, he'll project virtually. Okay, that's fine. Is he up now? Can you confirm?
Can you see me?
We also have Mr. Ife Adebayo, the special advisor to the president on innovation. Mr. Adebayo is going to be represented by Miss Chioma Okoro. From my understanding, she is in the hall. Ms. Okoro, please. Ms. Chioma Okoro, okay, fine, thank you very much. So she's representing the special. A round of applause for the lady. Yes. Next, pardon me. I have our moderator, and she is Aberdeen, United Kingdom, and I'm talking about Chineze Emejulu. She here? I have information about how I'm supposed to couch or render your name, and I'm going to that was what I was struggling with, but I'm going to just make that correction. It is Chineze Emejulu Dadieng. She's a member of the faculty of the Robert Gordon University, and she's going to be moderating this session. Director of Fullmark Group is Sriram in the room, please. Okay, that's a no. So I will want to bring up Mr. Anibe Achemogo. I got it right this time. to join this session because I know from my previous engagement. Finally, I think I have one more person to bring up, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, I think that's that. So, Chair Chineze? Okay, so the session is up.
No. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My name is Chineze Mejulu Dadieng. I'm a lecturer in supply chain management and procurement with the Robert Gordon University in Scotland. And today I would be your moderator on transforming farm productivity via innovation and research. Before we proceed, I would invite our panelists to please introduce themselves, tell us what you do.
Salah Sagagi from Dangote Business School and an advisor to a consultant to the Ministry on Agricultural Policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Choma Okoro. I'm the CEO of Woodlab Innovation. We are a tech company and we focus more on human capital development for youth and entrepreneurs in Nigeria. Thank you.
Can I just can I just call up Mr. Danjuma Adejo, please, CEO of Odijad? Is he here? I missed him out. Okay. Let's go.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anibe Achimogu. I am the Managing Director of Ariwa Cotton and Allied Products Limited, and also the President of the National Cotton Association of Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for this session, like I said earlier, we'll be focusing on transforming productivity. According to the Food and Agricultural Organization, it states that 90% of the farms are managed by small-scale farmers, and these small-scale farmers, in lieu of these small-scale farmers often experience food insecurity themselves. So, what is this session going to do? We're going to talk about mitigating these issues, looking at food security, food sustainability via innovations and research. So I'll start with Professor Sagagi. I hope I got your name correctly, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Mr. Andrew Blanche, bear with me. Can you please briefly introduce yourself and tell us what your company is about?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone in the hall. I'm sorry not to be with you. I did try, but it was difficult. I've been luckily very well represented by our manager for West Africa, who's with you there, Frederick Roygoe. So he's there, and he'll be able to pick up any points that you may wish to follow on after this meeting. I'd also like to say that we're also represented there by Sam Musa, who's our technical representative in Nigeria, based in Nigeria. So what are we? So I'm Andrew Blanche. I'm the MD of Alvin Blanche Company, which is a manufacturer based in the UK, but we have worldwide operations. So our focus is on innovation in crop processing, and we have, in fact, we've been working in Nigeria for 60 years. Myself, I've been traveling there for 40 years, and my daughter, who's taken on the role of export manager for the region, for the whole of Africa, has been traveling there, I think, for 13 years. So, and my father before me started traveling in Nigeria in the 60s. So I think we got quite a long record in the country. Apart from, and we're supported by a good export team now who are helping us to expand our sales as the markets develop. I just wanted to say it's an honor to be invited. We really feel passionate about the opportunities in Africa generally, especially in Nigeria, which we know best of all. We really want to be ongoing part, as we have been for 60 years. We want to play a bigger role in helping to find good solutions, the best solutions we know a lot about, and we feel we've got a role to play and value to add. And that's where we'd like to continue. And so
So moving on to Professor Sagagi, my first question to you would be increasing especially small-scale farmers' productivity and their capacity. What policies have been put in place?
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. From the previous conversation in the last session, I think a brief of that policy has already been provided by the Director of PPC. For the first time, Nigeria honest itself. One, we have been doing a lot in agriculture since the 1960s, but we have been getting something quite wrong. That's the issue of knowledge, technology, and extension. And part of the reason why Nigeria is still a net importer of food is simply because we have not paid significant attention to these important components. So what the new policy, 2022 to 2027, in terms of knowledge generation, in terms of indigenous technology, in terms of delivering that knowledge and that technology. To your question, anybody who is here in Abuja and riding a Mercedes or staying in a mansion, the only people that are holding this country together today are the peasant farmers, simply because at this moment, Nigeria observed most of these farmers, 80%, peasants, the smallholders, they don't have access to most of the things that we are talking about today. The fertilizer is not accessible by most of them. Even if it is there, they cannot afford it. The issue of farm inputs is still a problem in this country. The issue of agricultural financing is a serious issue in this country. Recently, even the issue of security of the agricultural land. What we envisage is that when we begin to implement, for the first time in this country, triple helix of becoming self-sufficient in terms of food. And many of you know triple helix, but from our assessment in the since 20, deploying knowledge the way it should be deploying that knowledge. So you have, under Ministry of Agriculture, over 20 research institutions, and you have over 200 universities in this country, and most of these universities, they have something to knowledge. Where is it? So the universities and the research institutions are producing knowledge, but it's somewhere else. Then they find that knowledge in those policies. And so the government and the research, they are not really working together. And just this morning, there is no way this sector that are expected to be the beneficiaries of the knowledge and the policy, where are they in the room in terms of articulation of the way forward? So the link between these three important activities the last 30 to 40 years. So what this new policy is trying to address is to say that we have knowledge, even if it's not knowledge. You take knowledge to farmers, give them knowledge that they understand. When you're talking about sustainability, when you're talking about mechanization, when you're talking about inputs, Give them those technologies, those sustainable practices that they can easily understand, looking at their level of development. So, and that's why you need to get that reservoir of knowledge to key into policy. And that if Nigeria is able to do this, I think we are going to transform our food system in the next 5 to 6 years, God's willing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. My next question is to Mr. Andrew Blanche. Are you still there, Mr. Andrew?
I'm here.
Okay, hi. So, following up with what Professor Sagagi has said, with the combination of knowledge, policy, and the private sector, collaborating with the private sector to collaborate with the small-scale farmers, with the combination of these methods that has been mentioned, to increase their capacity and also to increase their productivity.
Business concept is all about linking with our clients, and whether the clients be governments, whether they clients be big multinationals, whether they be entrepreneurs or even small entrepreneurs, every time our objective is to find the right solution by talking to them, understand finding the right solution for the actual customer. And we're really big on that particular subject. So, and when we can tackle challenges, and sometimes that means we have to go and innovate to find solutions to get around problems that they're facing. We may not have every single tool in the box, but we find a way to get there. And that's what makes this job so interesting, and why we're all so motivated by it, because every challenge is different, and so we're constantly trying to find the right way forward. Have I got a second to say something about productivity in general? Can I expand on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just wanted to say, a company that manufactures from the base materials all the way up. We're not an assembly operation. We start with flat steel. We start with basic components, and we build everything up from there in-house in our own factory here in the UK. We invest more than 10% of our turnover every year in the factory alone, in equipment, not in our capabilities. It's enabled us to become a world-class manufacturer. It's enabled us to keep our costs down. It's enabled us to stay competitive in the face of even from a European base. And so we understand what those investments can gain, but we also understand, I certainly understand, having been on the other side of the fence, how challenging it is to get those investments right. Like for instance, if we take the different thing, you've got to do quite a lot of research to make sure you're in the right one. From our perspective in the factory, is all about finding somebody who's got sustained performance, who is going to do the job right and not going to leave you in any kind of trouble, and also giving you quality, because you're investing for a long time. You don't want anything that's going to be a short-term fix. And the next step is financing. Now, that's quite easy for us in the UK. It's really not that challenging, but I hugely understand how challenging it is in a market like Nigeria. And we've got customers of ours, long-standing customers of ours, who in the hall today, and I'd like to say hello to them, but also to thank them for show how much we appreciate how much they've had to go through to invest in our equipment. We know it's really tough. So I don't know what the answers are on that one. I just know that that's a challenge. Training operatives and making sure that everyone knows what they're supposed to do and to get the best out of the equipment. That's just as important as getting the right equipment. And another thing I know it's bad enough in England these days to try and retain staff. They're so competitive. But in Nigeria, I know as soon as that can be done to help training and help, apart from the supplier training, but in general, training of the workforce to try to kind of operation. So if there's anything that can be done within the government or within the country generally that can help that, I would definitely think it's worthwhile. Those are just a few thoughts on productivity from my own personal perspective, I suppose.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, skill farmers and the private sector to increase their productivity.
Thank you. In our experience, we know that this has gone a long way, even in agriculture, education, finance, different sectors really. What Professor Sagagi says, well, where is it going? So we have to look at how are we converting that knowledge to products and services. But then again, do we have the skill sets to convert that knowledge to product and services? So for instance, you have a lot of initiatives going on. You have agricultural loans, but we're looking at how we can increase products that we have. Have they been designed in a way that these farmers can have access to it? Do they have the skill sets to write even a grant proposal to get access to the sort of loans and the initiatives? So that's what we should be looking at in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of technology transfer as well. We need to ensure that they have the skill set to be able to leverage whatever transfer of knowledge and technology that we're passing on to them, farmers. How do we change the narrative of taking agriculture out of that mindset that the young people have, thinking that, oh, for you to be a farmer, it means that you don't have anything else to do? What sort of narrative can we, create to change that mindset? How do we get across to our graduates early on? How do we provide incentives to make them see that this is actually a very lucrative sector that they can get in? Now, a few things that we have come across in our line of work: productivity and sustainability. We need to look up 200 million. So why are we not leveraging this human capital? We have to look at policies that can grow out of the world, because they have put in a lot of capital in developing their humans. Now, anyone that wants to develop any software would go to, Upwork and get someone from India to do it for them for cheap. So when we are looking at policies, can we look at policies that will actually support human capital development in areas of knowledge and tech transfer? We can also look at a case of the research institutes in Kenya, Impala Research Institute. This was developed by Princeton, and what the institute that is presently in Kenya, and the Princeton University, they are using this to leverage knowledge transfer. So can we look at areas of exchange, knowledge transfer, exchange programs, initiatives like the NACINI Delta II program that's currently going on with the Czech Republic? These are the things that we should be looking at. But then how can we make sure that all of these initiatives are also targeting the small-scale farmers? How can we help them to convert that knowledge into products and services?
Okay. Thank you. As a follow-up to what you just said now, skill farmers or small businesses see the benefit of, implementing new innovations. Bear in mind that innovation does not just relate to the technological aspects to it. We also talk about organizational structures, business processes, and so on and so forth. So how can they help them have a change mindset? Because if you think back to it, before one can innovate, you have to have a different mindset. So how can the government help achieve?
Creating programs and events. However, I think that the government can do a bit more. When fintech started booming, I know that at some point the CBN had a roundtable with certain people to discuss about the frameworks and the structures. However, when you look at the people that attended such programs, they were big companies, big techs. So who is representing the small startups? Who is representing to the SMEs, right? So I think that there is that communication gap in terms of taking the information right to the people that actually need it. You know, when we talk about infrastructure, it's not just the infrastructure, it's also, can these people have access to that infrastructure? Yes, security is one of them, but there are certain things that we require for the small-scale farmers to get access to. Who is bringing that, you know, information to them? Are we just focusing on the big cities like the Abuja local farmer in Abia State, who is taking it to a small local farmer in Borno, right? So that is where the area of security has to come in play. But aside from the security, those infrastructure has to be available to them. Who is taking that message down to them? So we look at, there are some startups, tech startups, like Hello Tractor. And what they've done is they have made tractors available to farmers. So instead of going to rent or buy your tractor, you can come together as a cooperative and rent a tractor. You can be 3 or 4 farmers, bring money together, rent a tractor, and then you can use it on your farm. But how can we scale such initiatives? How can we scale such infrastructure to make sure that it gets to them? So I think that's the area that the government needs to push a bit more in terms of the communication, in terms of scaling these private initiatives. There is another example, individuals like ourselves can go on their platform and actually invest your money into, you know, any farm. It could be a rice farm or pepper, and you're just raising capital for farmers to use for their next, you know, production, because more capital them to produce more. And then we also have to, right? How do you pass on maybe information around a particular style of precision farming to a farmer in a Ebonyi State? Are you going to fly down there? But that's why we have to look at technology. Are there infrastructures in that area that would allow a farmer to get text messages or even USSD codes about how they can, you know, use certain techniques to make their farming more productive? So in terms of infrastructure, yes, there is security, there is access to it, but technology, it's really at the heart of anything that we need to do for sustainability and productivity.
Okay, thank you. Well, what about the IDICE? The IDICE? IDICE. IDICE projects, bear with me.
Oh.
IDICE projects, yeah.
Right. So I can just tell you what I know about the IDICE. I'm not actually part of the people developing it. However, we are part of the partners. That it's an amazing opportunity coming to Nigerian youths in technology and creativity. It's African Development funded, a partnership between African Development Bank, the Nigerian government, and other development partners like the Islamic Development Bank, French Development Agency, and the rest. And the plan is to raise, if I'm not mistaken, maybe $500 million, but don't quote me on that. And the investment is meant to go into, you know, supporting the tech and creativity sector in Nigeria. They're looking at startups, venture capitals as well. You know, just how can we grow our privacies? So, you know, IDICE is really about supporting the tech and the creativity sector in Nigeria.
Chimugu. Did I get that correctly? Okay. So they've mentioned heavily collaborating with the private sector. So in your experience, have you been able to collaborate with this private sector and small-scale farmers? Because in collaborating with them, you have to build trust. So how have you been able to achieve that so far?
Thank you very much. The collaboration, are you talking about or asking about the collaboration of the private sector with government-led programs or policy?
Yes, plus the small-scale farmers.
Towards the small-scale farmers. Well, for me, I happen to be the president of the National Cotton Association of Nigeria that has over 200,000 small-scale farmers, cotton farmers. And, I think, from everything that has been said so far, I think that there's still gaps, Policies, I commend government and I commend the Ministry of Agriculture and so on and so forth. That policies tend to be well thought out. But I think implementation has always been a challenge, either from the side of the association in quotes or the private sector or the government itself in policy development and so on. As president of a large association, for instance, I can't remember the last time I was called by any government, ministry, agency, to be part of, the development of a policy or a program for that matter. So there is that gap that is still, very much there. But as an association, for instance, even from a private sector perspective, wanting to work closely with smallholder farmers, we have tried our best to engage them. I mean, part of what has happened, for instance, is that today, if you want to know where a particular cotton farmer is and operates and farms, pretty much you can get that, data, which we have, data bank for that, geolocations are known, the BVN, the biometrics of the farmers and so on and so forth. So it makes it easy to identify, farmers. Now, when it comes to supporting those farmers, those smallholder farmers, it becomes a bit more challenging. When we talk of all the innovations, but you don't have the manpower, skill sets, only in cotton, but it's lacking generally in agriculture in Nigeria. That needs to be brought back. We're talking about the importance of training. We're talking about climate change, for instance. How does the farmer, how is the farmer assisted to understand and read and deal with climate change? We need training. We need to train, and the best people to train are the extension service providers. And when we talk about also government, people say you're always talking about government, but government is large. Now, if government decentralizes and hands over a lot of these services and things like that, but I think that, at the end of the day, the smallholder is still not feeling the impact of the policies that have been enacted, the programs that are ongoing. We participated in the Anchor Brewers program. I must confess that that was still to me, one of the best programs anyway, because it actually directly, impacts the farmers, activity, but then, we talk about sustainability and so on and so forth. And that is why I think the AFAN president was talking about policies that, yes, have been enacted, but, they change acronym names, and you can hardly follow up. So there must be sustainability in all these things that we do. So I think for me that's there is a gap, certainly. And innovation, yes, is good. Is it trickling down enough? Not enough in my books. The smallholder farmers, yes, we encourage them to continue to do what they're doing, but they also need that mechanization aspect to be brought in, the technology that you've talked about. Research, for instance, I think that also we are not focusing on. and given the importance that it deserves. So for instance, when we talk about cotton, for instance, the only institute mandated in Nigeria to develop cotton, so to speak, is the Institute for Agricultural Research in ABU Zaria. And of course, it's government, and maybe funding is not enough, and so on and so forth. So when we approach them and say, look, we want to work with you, we need planted material. Breeder seeds, because they're responsible for breeder, foundation, certified seeds, so to speak. And where we require 1,000 metric tons, for instance, we can't get up to 5 metric tons. So you find that if we, with all the technology, all the support that you give to the farmers, even with the training, if we don't have the right planting material, we'll be wasting our time. So and that is the research that needs to be done, to develop proper planting materials that has taken into cognizance, the climate change, climatic change, and so on and so forth. So I think for me, these are the critical things that need to be looked at.
Okay, thank you very much. I will throw that to Professor Sagagi. You've just heard Mr. Achimugu that in the development of this policy, the government did not collaborate with these sectors. So what is your response to that? And how, if the government didn't collaborate, how did they now develop this policy?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not going to argue with that very well, but I think AFAN is here. And I think AFAN is the umbrella body of farmers. And I think, in particular, Farouk has been with us for the last 3 years developing this policy. And the director planning is there. We have traveled around the country. In fact, we don't even wait for the farmers to come. We actually go to them. We're in the northeast, we're in the south-south, we're in the southwest, meeting palm oil, cocoa, groundnuts, all the associations. But I must appreciate that in Nigeria there are hundreds of associations representing different crops. We tried, the ministry tried to ensure that at least the major ones have actually been, I said major not to belittle anybody. I think we have gotten the perspective of the farmers. And one of the things that was done for the first time in this country is the subjecting the policy to validation at the grassroots level. And that included even members of the civil society organizations. I believe it was in this hall that a lot of changes was made in the policy because of the contribution of many stakeholders. So I must appreciate that a lot of consultations have been made, and but of course certainly not everybody. Nigeria is so wide, and if you say you're going to consult everybody, then the work may not actually be completed. But I believe there is still an opportunity because I think my brother has mentioned something quite fundamental, which I totally agree with. Sometimes it's not about the policy itself, it's about the implementation. And that's why I must also say that for the first time, the federal government is coming up with an implementation plan, not only because you have the policy, so now you're going to have an action plan. And the action plan has to be backed by a monitoring and evaluation mechanism. That is present because that is what is going to help the country address some of these binding constraints. We have been told that, and it's obvious, agriculture is on concurrent lists. States are doing it, local governments are doing it, federal government is doing it. So what this policy tries to do is to bring all the three in one room, to say that in my local government is cotton. I'm from Funtua, for example, and in Funtua, we're prominent for cotton. So cotton needs to be discussed at Katsina and it needs to be discussed in Abuja, so that whatever policy prescription is there trickles down to the states, up to the local government. That's the framework that this policy is looking at, and that's why I feel is robust. And to also take it a little bit, because we have been talking about this so much, the issue of technology. These farmers, there is no way you can enable them to boost their productivity unless they have access to basic technology and quality inputs. And if we don't address this, and I don't want to go into details on that, if the policy is already online, people can download it and they can see how the federal government wants to do it. But Nigeria will continue to remain net importer of food unless we begin to practice good agricultural practices. And that is the issue of seeds, the issue of chemicals, the issue of we need to provide the extension, we need to provide the tools for processing. And that's why I am very happy with this idea of spatial agro-processing and other processing activities that are going around in many places. I don't want to mention states, but there are so many states that have taken initiatives to have some of these processing activities so that we can add value. In my opinion, Nigeria has no business importing meat. Nigeria has no business importing most of our textiles from anywhere, and we have no business importing meat because we have it in abundance. But what is missing is what the gentleman has rightly observed. You have research institutions that they don't have budget for research. And that's one of the complaints of one of the ministers of agriculture who visited a number of research institutions. You are paying professor, but he doesn't have one kobo for research. Most of the researches come from collaboration with donor-funded organizations. And that's why this time around the federal government is working and seriously to ensure that that knowledge hub of the country is actually being mobilized to contribute to the knowledge that can now be transferred to the farmers. Is it going to be an easy process? I will tell you, no, it's not going to be an easy process. It will take a lot of political will. It will take a lot of inter-MDA collaboration because agriculture is in different ministries, departments, and there's so many aspects of agriculture that are driven by private sector. So we need to bring all this together in order to move forward. And I thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. A follow-up question again to what you've just said. You've mentioned the introduction of technology to these farmers. Bear in mind that these farmers most times are in rural areas that do not actually have access to this technology. So how can those technology be implemented?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, the gentleman, sorry, I have to be using it because it's like you're speaking. It's like, I think you have been consulted because you know so much about this policy. Yeah, the good news is sometimes you can't ask farmers to really acquire these technologies. And that's why sometimes you have these tractor hiring systems. And the federal government is already working to make sure that we diversify. There's so many private initiatives that are hiring some of these tools, but they are not enough. So what we're trying to do as a country right now is to ensure that we use private sector resourcefulness and efficiency mechanisms to ensure that it's not just tractor. You know, tractor is just one aspect of, there are some places, for example, you go to the southern part of Nigeria that tractor may not necessarily work. You may have to use other tools to ensure that farmers are used. So is the box of chocolate of a lot of technology mixed that federal government has decided on its own that this thinking that federal government is going to provide, is going to subsidize, is not going to work. It has to be private sector driven approach. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is to what currently is going on to mobilize farmers as cooperatives and clusters and make sure that you build a capacity to assimilate and absorb knowledge and to build a capacity to mobilize resources so that they can jointly own some of these technologies. And I believe there are so many development partners in Nigeria that are helping in that regard. And that's why very soon there's going to be a donor roundtable and private sector roundtable so that some of these nitty-gritty areas will actually be tied before the implementation actually gets enforced. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanche, are you still online?
I'm here.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question for you. From the implementation of technology, like Professor Sagagi has said, with the small-scale farmers, and he's mentioned the idea of shared ownership or shared risk across board. How can we feed the nation utilizing these methodologies? And also in feeding the nation, how do we mitigate the reduction of food wastage? If you look back, a lot of farmers tend to, in the production of their commodities, 1/3 of their commodities tend to be wasted at the end of the day. So how do we mitigate these issues?
Thank you. Yes. Just picking one of those at a time. First of all, if we start with waste, which is such a huge issue, post-harvest losses, I think is maybe how we could summarize that one. Post-harvest losses could account for. You said 1/3. I believe I've seen it could be as staggering as that. I do believe that as well that I think that the federal ministry even announced here that post-harvest losses are a staggering number. Of course, post-harvest losses come in many different ways, and there's not one magic bullet. But there are some there are some fundamentals about post-harvest losses, and some of them are to do with storage, some of them are to do with how you handle the crop as soon as it's come in from the field. And with trying to cope with the harvest, have they got enough resource to harvest it in an efficient way to get it in from the field quickly? That's a big one. I think you mentioned about hired. If I could hive off to the hired shared equipment for a second, that seems to me to be a really great opportunity for helping to mechanize more of agriculture, small-scale agriculture. There's no way that every farmer is going to have a complete set of equipment. So shared equipment must be a huge gain if we can project that federal ministry funded and financed 25 grain aggregation centers, which we kind of worked with them to develop how it would be. And those systems have been installed around the country over the last 4 years. And I think because there were ideally there'd be a lot more of them, because obviously they're not within reach of everyone. But the more of those centres that could be around, it enables farmers to bring their produce, get it cleaned and dried, and safely put into bags that they can even take away themselves and decide when they want to sell it, or they could sell it there and then. There's a number of options, but the main thing is to have the resource available to be able to do something about it and not rely on the weather. And is it going to be okay? Is it going to be dry? Are you going to be able to get it clean properly to get the weevils out of it? And there's so many to try and do it on to tackle this solution, this issue of stemming post-harvest losses. It's critical to have resources and teaming together, like Professor said, seems to me a really key to this. Shared use of equipment harvesting, shared use of facilities to handle the crops after harvest. We also, when it comes to drying, our business is developed from, whilst we have innovation in post-harvest preservation and processing, the drying is a key central part of what we do. We dry more or less any kind of crop, and of course drying is one of the best ways to preserve by weevil, etc. We dry whether it's grain, whether it's oilseed, soya, even cottonseed. I noticed that Mr. Anibe was mentioning about cotton growers. The cottonseed is another type of oilseed which needs drying often. Cocoa, you have to dry that properly to make sure you get the best possible price for export. shea nut butter, shea nuts, we're drying those as well in Nigeria. Again, before export. Thyme is another crop that we've started to dry, hibiscus too. So there are lots of different crops that you have which all gain from being well handled when they've been harvested. We do appreciate that, again, the cost of this equipment is a challenge, and we've tried to look at how we can downscale to make it in an appropriate way for the smaller sector, especially with the high cost of energy now. It's such a big challenge, and it's a challenge to utilize solar energy entirely for drying, but it's something we're determined to. We're putting a lot of effort into seeing how we can improve the viability of solar assisted drying on a small scale. We'd really like to if I could pick up on something else in terms of partnership, we think that there's a lot to be done, and we'd really like to find partners who we can work with to develop technology that really that tackles those challenges head on for small scale farmers. In other words, here in the UK and Europe, where we have big product, we more larger scale equipment. We have continued to always keep our eye open for the small scale too. But it's if we can do more research and innovation within country in Nigeria, where we already have a team. I mentioned our engineer who's even in the hall today, Sam Musa, but we've had a team that's been working with us in Nigeria for 35 years on our post installation commissioning. So we've got a lot of technical expertise within our organization who are based in Nigeria. And if we could find a way of working with other companies, other private investors, or with research institutes, we already have done work with institutes in the past, like Federal Institute of Research in Nashodi. We've developed a tomato processing, a drying system, drying tomato paste factory with them. But if we could continue to do that, we'd really be very open to talking to any partners who'd like to engage with us, because we think we've got a lot of experience to offer, but we're very much in the business of partnership. So yes, I think hopefully I've covered one or two of your questions there. I hope I've covered them all. But yes, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Blanche. Thank you to our panelists. That was quite an interesting session. We could go on and on. I'll give opportunity to the audience for people who have questions. Raise your hand and yeah. Okay, the gentleman.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Jide Adedeji. I'm a manufacturer as well as an adjunct professor of agribusiness in the Lagos Business School. Professor Sagagi, you started a very good concept, and I want to make a postulation and see what you think about it. In Nigeria today, 80 to 90% of our farmers are using hoes and cutlasses. If we want to increase productivity of these people, I think we should begin to think about their capacity in terms of how much are they able to do these tractors and big harvesters that we are thinking about. I think we have to come to the level of these farmers in terms of their ability to have diesel and power to run these tractors, to buy or maintain the tractors. So what I'm suggesting that we need to put our focus to is farm implements at the level of technology of motorbicycles and tricycles. And imagine this idea of tractors that are expected in the 30 million and are expected to go 5-10 kilometers every day or something like that. We don't have those kind of farms. We have very small farms. We have farmers that are small. But if these people have equipment that they have the know-how to operate, the ability and money to maintain and fund, and even put fuel into, the productivity yield we are going to get is going to be significant. Innovation, research, there's a lot of research material and understanding and knowledge out there. We have to understand where we are, and that's how you started your discussion actually, that we have started to be true to ourselves in terms of where we are. So what I'm putting forward, I'd like to have what you think about it, sir.
Please go ahead. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. I think, thank you very much, points, these animals transitions. But of course, we need tractors. I'm a farmer myself, and I don't think I don't need tractor. I really need tractor, no matter how much it is, because it's going to be more expensive for me. Space than others. So in those locations, they will definitely need tractors. But what I think is going on in some localities is the local governments are coming in to help farmers with, I don't want to use the word subsidizing, but contributing to the costs of running some of these tractors. I know a particular local government that own the tractors, fuel the tractors, and simply just hire the tractors, the farmers, at something that is really reasonable. And that's what we're trying to promote as far as this policy is concerned. And of course, the issue you mentioned about research is very, very important. We have done a lot in this country, and take fish, for example, because we have been talking about crops. In Nigeria, we are not even tapping up to 20% of the abundance of fish resources we have in this country. But every year we are importing fish. And right now we are importing food from UK, we are importing food from all over the places. While actually the existing capacity we have, we are not even utilizing half of it. And it's simply because those knowledge which we have already put in shop and nobody wants to use it, it's a problem. And there's one thing in Nigeria. You're from Robert Gordon University, and you know that in the UK, there is no way they will do anything. For anybody who has gone to Korea, he knows that before anything comes out government, it has to be verified by a research institution. But in Nigeria, you say knowledge is separate, policy is separate. In fact, when you start speaking, the way, I don't get your name, sir. At the energy, the moment you start talking, they will say, this is academic, isn't it? So we have this issue of, okay, academic is different, practice is different. Well, actually, they go hand in hand. So, and I think, let's give the Federal Ministry of Agriculture the benefit of doubt, and by extension, the federal government of Nigeria, to see how they are going to bridge this gap in the next 6 to 7 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, the lady.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for the organizers. I express my thanks to the organizers of this program. Professor Sergey, when you were talking about policies, I don't know, I've not seen the document. I don't know whether it covers, the area of having food sufficiency in-house, in-country, before exporting. Because that's exactly what is going on. And you see, it's really very, very surprising that even the foodstuff, you can't even find them in the market. With the existence of all the policies and we have a lot of human resources, both human capital and all that. We can't find the food in the market. You can tell me it's because of fuel increase. I mean, there are a lot of network problems to that. Then my question is, how can we begin to? And you say something very fundamental. Everybody just working in silos. The academics, they are on their own. The government on their own. The industrialists on their own. CSOs on their own. So how can we begin to make a network to begin to come together? For example, in this house, do we have local farmers that are even represented? Apart from the middle level, farmers and the high-scale farmers. We don't have them. Do we have CSOs working in the communities? Probably yes or no. Then, how do we begin to make a network to begin to move forward? Because this thing is beginning to be a national embarrassment, that we have resources on the ground, we have the food crop, we have good weather, and yet we are going hungry. And yet every little thing they get is exported. Look at the yam is being exported, and then the beans, they're all being exported. Somebody said in one form that about in the Kano, the Jigawa end, where you have the boundary, there are thousands of beans bags are being driven across the border. Now, who is even watching over these things? There is no market, commodity pricing boards anymore that can even regulate the prices of food. I mean, everything is just like going haywire. So the Ministry of Agri should also take up, in addition to the good work they are doing, they should also take up this board pricing, commodity pricing, whatever. They should also bring it on board to the policy. I don't know where it can come in, so that everything is like a comprehensive package. And then when we're implementing it, then let us also know that we are going somewhere. And then let it also be backed by legal, by the legislative, so that it wouldn't be policy somersault. Somebody mentioned OFN, all these programs and projects that they came and then they go. They came and they die. It looks as if different. It looks as if we're making progress. All of a sudden, another government comes in and is wiped off. I mean, we can't continue like this. We have to have a sustainable, legal policy on a Feed Nigerian Summit. I think they should also take it from there. And then my next question goes to Ms. Okoro. Who are your beneficiaries? I mean, how do you choose the people you train in the program? Is it the peasant farmers? Is it the SMEs? Is it CSOs? Or
I think the question you answer is really quite on target. The federal government's first priority, if Director will allow me to speak on his behalf, is first of all food security. And that's why when you look at that policy, it's all like the moment you go to the website of FMAD, you're just going to see it there. You can just download it right away. You're going to see that in the last 8 years, Nigeria has even closed borders in order to promote rice production. And we have seen the benefit of doing that, all the investment that we made. Otherwise, during this COVID-19, I don't know how we are going to feed ourselves. So learning from this, the federal government now is saying, besides the rice will continue to promote rice. And rice is not exportation. The policy is not saying let's produce rice and export. The policy is saying let's produce rice and feed ourselves. And the second issue is fish. Right now, Nigeria is relying, many of these fish you see frozen is actually being imported from somewhere. When you go to the FMAD, you're going to see all these big companies coming in, give me license to import fish, while we have fish all over the place. So the policy is also saying is that Nigeria should reduce fish importation in the next 5 to 6 years by enhancing local production. And the issue of milk, many of the milk you eat, even perhaps the one that we're going to have our tea break, is imported. So what we are also saying is that we are not going to take our milk out, we are going to produce it, we are going to process it, and we are going to supply ourselves. So there's so many products. The products have been placed in different stages. There are some for food security, and there are some for diversification, production, and income. When you take, for example, the issue of hibiscus, that one, I mean, if we don't eat hibiscus, it's not, so it's for export. If you take issue of sesame, that one is grouped for export. So there are some that have already been categorized for export, and there are some that are really for food security. And of course, the other point you mentioned, I think, is an advice, which I believe those concerned here would actually take it into consideration, especially the Feed Nigeria Summit. I think what they're doing, bringing all stakeholders in one room, to have this kind of conversation, I think is the way to go. And I believe this forum will also align with what the Department of Planning and Policy is doing to ensure that we really patch this gap between the government, the academics, the private sector, and civil society organization. Thank you so much.
Mr. Kodu.
All right, thank you for your question. So I'll answer your question first, and then I'll tell you how we go about it. So our beneficiaries are from different levels, from the micro, small, medium enterprises, small-scale farmers, medium-scale farmers, tech entrepreneurs as well. We focus mostly in programs that would help and support youth in their businesses. Now, we run our programs through our foundation, and there is a reason why we do that, because we're able to work with development partners, we're able to work with the government. So like Professor said, in terms of collaboration, there is that gap between the academia and industry. So this is where we come in. We work with academia, with the industry, with the government, because we're trying to bridge that gap to work together and make sure that we are creating like a last mile intervention to businesses and farmers that require the solution. So normally when we run programs, we ensure that, we try to raise funding, with development partners like the UNDP, Microsoft, and they help us to ensure that we're able to provide the training for free to these farmers, to the youth, so that they don't have to spend anything. And in the process of doing that, we also help them to raise capital. But we just don't give away the money. We equip them with the skill sets so that they know how to manage the capital when it comes to them. So there is an entire process, with their businesses. We look at the accounting, how they can scale in the market, how they can even take their products and services online so they can reach out to more people. So our beneficiaries, it cuts across different levels.
Okay, thank you so much. I will take one last question. The gentleman in the middle. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. So my name is John David. I'm the president of PUIC, an innovation tech company. I just have a few questions. I want to know if the government have in place a grassroots development plan where equipment sharing, doing that is good, but is dependent. It's dependent on the Western economies. What I know is good for us to continue to imbibe the culture of equipment sharing. I think that the government should have a long-term plan where we should begin to develop engines by ourselves. Nigeria have a good number of youth. Intellects are doing well outside the country. So what is the government plan in terms of this grassroots development? Because I know if we don't do that, we will continue to be dependent, while we call ourselves dependent nation. Right? Exchange. Technology exchange in terms of knowledge exchange, that's what we're thinking about. This is a suggestion. Why don't we have almost every sector in Nigeria, we are exporting our raw material? Okay, why can't we use the raw material as a system of acquiring technology? I mean, real-time technology. Because in the recent past, the landowner is the king. The landowner is the king. Today, the raw material owner is the king. But it seems that the raw material owner is the servant. Can we change that reading? If we can, how? Finally, I want to thank the last speaker, the madam that spoke there. She re-echoed the question I asked yesterday when we were doing the press conference. We're talking about conference the other day, and we're talking export to survive. Export to survive. We need the hard currency, I was told yesterday, which is good. And actually, we need the hard currency. But can we add a transition where self-sustenance is the short term, and we come to a break-even point, and then export? Or why this export jingles is food security? Because if you are hungry, a hungry country...
You have 30 seconds more.
Yes.
I think that's my question. All right, thank you very much. I would, because of time, please download that policy so that you will know the thinking of the government, and go to the chapter about the discussion there was developing indigenous technology, using indigenous knowledge. So I think there you can get the thinking of the government. The whole idea is not just to be importing the knowledge and importing the technology. Is using the local knowledge, using the local fabricators, using the local engineers, fabricators, technologies to actually begin to have local technology. So that one is already, it's non-negotiable. And of course, the other issue you mentioned about the food systems in Nigeria, I don't think we need to put it the way you put it, that is short term or long term. We can do both. We can feed ourselves. Look at Nigeria, we're 200 million. And look at our land. Just somebody yesterday was telling me our coastal areas, you know, the fish. So, and that's why I like the caption of this this session is on increasing productivity. The moment you increase that productivity using all the elements we mentioned today, you're going to have enough food to feed yourself. The prices of food will go down. But the reason why you see food is going, and that's why Madam is saying there's no food to eat. It's not that there is no food to eat. The food is there. The only thing is very, very expensive. Those people you see taking beans to Niger, it's simply because it's better for you to take your beans to Niger and sell it in Niger currency and bring the Niger currency and exchange it to Naira than to sell it in Nigeria. But there is also something interesting that is going on. There is something, you know, in Africa, we have this. Borders really don't care. Most of the beans you're going to eat in Nigeria is coming from Niger. If you go to one village called Isa, you're going to see that's between it until when the Nigerian beans gets down, then they will supply it to Nigeria. So there is this circulation of food amongst African countries, which I think is good for the food security of the region. But what is very, very important is we need to be serious about increasing productivity of smallholder farmers. We need to be very serious about linking those farmers to processors and markets and ensuring that Nigeria feed itself and also get foreign exchange from our agro-allied industries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Agagi.
Excuse me, moderator. My question is to Prof.
Again.
And, you know, I have to advocate for cotton, definitely, and in extension for the cotton textile and garment industry.
Yeah.
In the policy that is online, will I see anything relating to cotton?
Absolutely.
Oh,
After we will
engage,
yes,
All
thank
right.
you.
Okay. Do we have an extra minute?
Maybe an extra minute.
Oh, okay, I have a final question to Mr. Achimogu. In your experience with the cotton traders and farmers, you know, do you encourage diversification of commodities? So, for example, I don't know much about the cotton industry. So, for example, assuming you're cultivating tomatoes, do you encourage cultivation of olives or other high-value crops?
5 seconds.
Yes. You know, with these farmers to increase their capacity and to add value to them?
Yes, actually we do, because we also have to consider food security component. You can farm maize, you can farm soya beans. This goes along pretty well with farming cotton. but also to protect cotton, especially when we're talking about climate change, when we're talking about biodiversity and so on and so forth. Cover crops, we're encouraging them also to be able to plant that. Sunflower, for instance, is good in terms of fighting pest attacks on cotton. So we do encourage them to at least cotton.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. I hope everyone has found interesting and you've been able to gain important information that you implement going forward. A round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.
Truly, thank you so much. I mean, I think we take first. In the course of that, the photographers. In the course of that, I would want to pay tribute to this panel, particularly the. No, please carry on. I'll just be speaking. The ladies, but Professor Sagagi has demonstrated exactly why added caveat. Yes, and we have, of course, there's someone online. Can we incorporate, into, can we incorporate the Alvin Blanche? He's in there? Okay, that's fine. But he has a colleague here. Yeah, you could just join. Sorry, Professor Sagagi, could you please pose again for me so that we capture the Alvin Blanche? And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking a tea break now. Tea served on the outside. You could do that, just grab something and come back in here because we don't have time at all. It's really running away from us. I know some of our brothers will need to be in the mosque for a quick prayer. So maybe we'll just take 20 minutes to achieve that back in here session. We are taking, what I say, we're basically just layering one. Ladies and gentlemen, someone forgot a pair of glasses yesterday. One of our panelists. If it's yours, my colleague has been faithful and dutiful enough to keep it here for you. The panel that is upcoming is going to be an explosive one. I have my adjunct professor from the Lagos Business School. And ladies and gentlemen, just to underscore that, Professor Sagagi is one of our partners in the process of ensuring that we keep this platform viable, effective, and responsive to all the needs of the stakeholders in the space. Working out of the Bayero University, Kano, Dangote Business School, and connected to their brain power to keep this platform virile, responsive, and effective, and securing your interest. I can just see the power of the private sector. You've ignored the tea outside, just enjoying this next. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, can we begin now to make our way back to the hall for the next session? We're running very much against time now, and so I will crave your indulgence to be a bit more ruthless as to the adherence to, the time specified for each session. In fact, we might abridge the time, the look of things. The population of the seats up here for the next session. And if you're supposed to be part of it and you hear my voice, please make your way to the auditorium. The session is about to commence. Limited. If he's here, please join us. The next, since I don't see Simon, Mrs. Rose Goslinger can take her seat. Maybe I should call up the moderator of the session so that he can basically rally his troops when he gets up here. I'm told the crunching and munching is still going on. Ladies, boy, business is not going to end anytime soon. subsequent. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. And do the sessions. Right, so I have shut it down. Shut it down. Let's be back in the hall. Yeah. Oh, you had me. That's mine actually, but our colleagues from Farm to You, you're wanted in the deal room. One of them to present the pitch deck. I know you're also part of this session, and having the session commence anytime from now. I hate to make this announcement because it would take some people out of here upstairs, but I'm told I need to tell you that pitches are going on, in the deal room. You are part of that. I should put it that way. If you're part of that, then go join them. The representative of Farm to You, please make your way to the deal room. It's your play now. Your pitch deck is up. Okay, back to the session. Is Simon Agofoshe here? Oh, beautiful. Simon. Simon, just take up your seat here. Thank you. I've broken the jinx. At least you're here. So, is representative of Pula Advisors, could you make your way up? I see Farm to You. All right? I think so. If you're outside and you're supposed to be part of the next session, please know that you're up. You need to make your way back into the hall.
For ag. No, so.
Sure, don't worry. I'm going to make. I'll do
Yeah, sure.
I'll tell you about her. Yeah, it's a hot mic. I was overhearing. That's how I heard you. Tell about the $2 billion transaction, eh? Can Mr. Kinka Akintunde, President, AFEX Nigeria, make his way up here. Akin Yinka, he's coming. I know he's in the deal room. In the deal room. Yes, please just fetch him. Mr. Daria Akintola, is he here? MD CEO Goldfort Nigeria Limited. You going to be represented? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, just speak. Mr. Anibe Achimugu is up again. Can I have the moderator, Professor Chedozie Egesi, Executive Director, National Root Crops Research Institute, Umudike. Join us here, sir. And, you know, when you look at the hall, you might want to think, you know, stuff's not going down. But the audience, you know, on the virtual platform are found. So you could just go on and allow the folks who are... I have shut down the tea break, actually. So there's no point being outside. My instructions are followed, you won't have tea. We'll just mix it up with, we'll do brunch, they call it. You know, we'll just have lunch after this session. So let me go over it again. Mr. Ishak Malam Yahaya, Chairman Commodity Brokers Association of Nigeria. About to start. Here is Simon.
From where?
Thank you. So, fortunately, I have Mr. Kiyinka Akintunde, President AFEX Nigeria in the room. Yeah, that round of applause should be more, you know. Okay, so let me run through the folks up here. I have Akin. I have Ms. Aisha Rahim, co-founder, CEO, Farms to You, on the panel. Mr. Daria Kintola, represented on the panel. And I have Professor Chidozie Egesi moderating. Do we have Ishak Malam Yahaya, Chairman, Commodity Brokers Association of Nigeria, here? Is he here? No. Okay, Professor Egesi, your show.
Right, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Richard, and good morning. Oh, it's not morning. Good afternoon, everyone, and a pleasure to be here again. And thank you for joining us. I also appreciate the good number of people that are online. So we are talking right now about financing, leveraging finance and insurance in the face of climate adversity, climate change in particular. And I would like to ask us to, we've heard the word adversity in the title, but can we all try to be hopeful and tailor our discussions from the point of view of hope rather than despair? I think we all have a lot of issues outside that we don't need to add to it. Nigeria can really be better, and let's stand on that point. So I'm going to go around. Somebody has warned me about the timing, but I think we are good on time. I'm going to go around starting with Aisha. I'd just like you to introduce yourself and regarding the title, how your company or your workplace, give a reflection on the title with viewpoint from your workplace, how it affects the people you work with, the business, and Nigeria, just that kind of ecosystem.
So I work with Farms to You, and as a company, we're building the operational engine for growers, suppliers, and buyers in the agricultural space. And speaking from the perspective of sustainability and climate impact, we are all aware in the room the floods that have recently been seen across Nigeria. A number of our farmers were affected by this, and the droughts in Kenya as well, much of East Africa, where we also have operations actually, where we are having too much water, they're not having enough, and that's the general theme of agriculture in its current state. Going back to what we actually do at Farms to You is essentially trying to bridge the gap with our supply chain technology. So what we do is in 3 stages. First of all, improve lending to growers. And growers include farmers of different sizes. The challenges that these folks have in accessing finance is that your traditional lending structure is designed for the corporate worker, the formal worker. If you walk into a bank, they will ask you things like, what is your monthly salary? Do you have a pay slip? These are not pertinent to informal folks like growers. And essentially, using our technology, we provide proprietary risk scoring that helps lenders better understand the risk of these growers in sense of, if a farmer is insured, that's a more accurate way of knowing what their risk level is, what their yield is compared to the market yield. So building those variables to then use that to assess their risk levels and increasing and improving the flow of capital to growers. So that's the first stage by which we build a solution for the market. The second stage is then also enabling frictionless supply chain. Currently, traffic from Saminaka, Kaduna to Ibadan, Oyo can take an average of 3 weeks. This is something to have a better estimate of how long your goods would take on the road, and essentially bridging those infrastructural gaps. You also have payment gaps as well, where through a transaction, it can take 6 weeks for, from the point of supplying produce to an off-taker to actually receiving the money in your bank account. So this is the second stage where we try to address those frictional points, and the third stage of then automating procurements to buyers, such as FMCG companies and processing companies. From the climate perspective, there's a real impact of the change in the environment on how these transactions will be completed, in the sense where there's more constraint on our infrastructure, then also things like what's the impact of insurance with the recent floods that have been seen in northern Nigeria. So yeah, that's my introduction, and hopefully I've given an insight on the climate impact as well, how it affects us.
Thank you, Aisha, and very interesting. We're going to move on to Goldford, Sudari, the same.
Hello? Yeah, okay, yes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Basically, we are a commodity trading company in the ag sector, and then we focus more on the value crops, and then we mainstream supplies to the processing companies. But one major work that we do with the farmers is solving the challenges of timing of cash flow. Most times, these farmers are not poor as being, described in most cases, but the challenge is the timing of their cash flow may run contrary with some other things that need cash in their lives. So we start with setting out their inputs, providing them support for inputs, and also giving them a guaranteed market. So we also allow the farmers to have access to this product themselves, to be able to sell to some people they've been selling to avoid the crisis of side selling. So we manage this by also helping them to expand the sizes they have, the size of farm that they have. And so with that, and the assurance that the products are going to be taken up by us, so they are back they are into business, and then things are moving fine. For us also as a company, we've seen that the challenge of commodity trading, as everybody currently advocating, we need to take the raw material beyond taking it from farmers and then bagging and just delivering to processing companies. It starts from increasing the capacity of the farmers and the quality of their production to meet specifications of most processors. Also adding other value like cleaning or intermediate processing before delivering to most of the processing companies. In addition to that, Goodfort is setting out, I think, the first privately owned special agro-processing zone here in Abuja, in Kwali, such that we are not just forwarding the commodities from farmers directly to processors, but giving room for farmers to co-own processing facilities, and also for direct investors to come into the processing facilities and process for a fee or before they sell their products. And so we think with a whole lot of associations, AFAN, All Farmers Association of Nigeria, the cocoa guys, and so many of that, they would be able to add value to their product beyond just selling raw materials to processors. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's go on to Mr. Simon Igofose, Pyrogenesis, for your perspective.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having Pyrogenesis here today. So I feel that we're among good company. This is the type of crowd that we like. And Pyrogenesis has invented a technology that works with the underutilized waste from the agricultural sector. So where you're harvesting, say, cassava or rice, there's typically a waste residue left in the fields by the farmers that isn't used for anything. It just rots or it's burnt. We use that in our system, which is a patented technology I'm the co-inventor of, to convert that waste into renewable electricity. It could be converted into process heat. That could be used for drying, or if you need the heat in processing, so like in palm oil or cassava flour production, they use a lot of heat. And from that material, we also get a byproduct, which is like a charcoal. And we've developed a method for upgrading and infusing that charcoal with nutrients to make it a biofertilizer. We also have a process that we've developed that the same materials can give us a bio-oil, which we've developed a method for upgrading to renewable kerosene and diesel. And then lastly, going back to the farmers and that biofertilizer I was talking about, when they use that biofertilizer on their soils, because it's carbon containing, that acts as carbon removal. And carbon removal earns carbon credits. So the world is very interested now in spending money on climate change mitigation, and a lot of carbon financiers that we're speaking to, and we even have purchase agreements now with carbon financiers, want to purchase those carbon credits. So our off-grid farming communities can now utilize what was previously an underutilized waste, convert that into electricity and heat that they can use to add value. And that's one of the points that was coming up. They can now have the electricity and the heat that they can use to add value to their primary production. And because we're generating carbon credits in the process, then we can link in with the financiers as well, who can provide the upfront capital to implement the equipment that's required in that community. So just like how the Industrial Revolution kick-started value addition in the West, so we can have an agricultural industrial revolution that uses crop waste and agri-processor waste as a feedstock in our technology. So we're very interested to be here today to learn and also to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now is the Akin's time. Effects.
Thank you, Prof. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For us, for me personally, it's an opportunity that we always seek to be part of in promoting activities that help to further develop the food stability, not only of Nigeria. Hello? 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 Okay. I think it was a needed break. So for me, for us as a company, one of the things we pursue is, and when you hear issues around climate changes and the likes that threatens food security, we don't see it as a negative thing, actually. We see it as areas where, as an organization, we can put in more structures to further enhance the food capacity of the continent. So FX as an entity actually builds its infrastructure around smallholder farmers with the idea of being able to link them directly to the markets. But as you look across the value chain and across global numbers and statistics, it's shown that in the next 10, 20 years, Africa would be feeding the world. And the question we need to ask ourselves now is, if we're going to feed the world in 20 years' time, how do we ensure that we have the capacity locally and across the continent to be able to provide this service that is required to feed the world? Yes, we had flood issues that is going to erode massive land. A very, very small percentage of it, which was actually insured, is a gap. Yeah, but the other question we need to ask ourselves is, what are the structures you need to put in place to ensure that those gaps are bridged and the value that is unlocked by smallholder farmers across the value chain is enriched? And one of the things we do to ensure those things are in place is, firstly, how do we ensure that the farmers' needs are met at all points in time? Recently, or annually, we do a survey we call it crop production survey. And we look at what are the things that could actually affect productivity of smallholder farmers. And the funny thing is, it's not absence of finance that actually stops farmers from producing. It's actually timely access of finance. Now, when you get that kind of insight, then you need to work around time. We all know agriculture is a time-sensitive activity, right? So if you put that kind of structure in place, you ensure that financing is in place at the right time. And then even though the financing is in place, if you don't have access to the appropriate inputs, then you still don't have agriculture to play. Now, all of these activities are things that go around and we see as being critical to the food system, to climate technology, across insurance and financing, that if we have the appropriate structure and infrastructure in place, it will help enhance acceptance and adoption by smallholder farmers. And the other thing we focus on at AFEX is building the appropriate infrastructure that enables stakeholders connect and grow the ecosystem, because the journey we are going on is difficult, it's not hard, and it's a long one. But if we can put a structure in place that galvanizes everybody across the value chain, then I think we're on the right path to going to where we need to.
Thank you, Akin. Excited to hear that journey is long but not that. Optimism is what we should all share. We need a lot of dose of optimism when you talk about Nigeria. I'm going back to Aisha, and I'm going to ask, and I'm speaking from a point of passion, personal passion for smallholder farmers. So whenever I hear someone is working to alleviate the issues around smallholder farmers, I want to ask, what are you doing with regard to tech, using technology to solve their problems? For example, how much of early warning systems have you employed or are you planning to employ to climate change, as to even the haulage? What are create for your farmers? We had Nigeria, saw in Nigeria a few months back, it was flood. You listen at other times, drought, prolonged drought, or sudden drought in of rainy season, or even locusts or weaver beds. All those are disasters that our farmers face, smallholder farmers face. Little or no safety nets. They have to deal with all that. But in other climes, we know that even though they may not be as small as our own smallholders, but they have access to some technologies. Talking about Southeast Asia, talking about Latin America, examples.
Thank you for that question. And I do have to caveat that that will be my last answer, just because I have a conflict given that we're running quite late. Right, so what are we doing for smallholder farmers? Akin has already made a good point of two things, the importance of insurance and the importance of timely decisions. So in the sense of safety net, this is where insurance is very, very critical. And there's a significant percentage of uninsured farmers, and things like insecurity actually adds, beyond the climate issues, added volatility into their production process. So I think insurance is an important safety net, and getting insurance is it has an element of education, because there are farmers that don't believe that it's required, who suffered from the floods quite heavily, because you can see River Niger from his farm. And he's just received a payout of 152,000. It was just on a 1 acre piece of land. And he invested 300, he actually received a loan through our platform. But as part of receiving that loan, because of how our product is designed, insurance is mandated. So that insurance protects their losses. So first thing I'll say is insurance. In terms of like timely updates, when it comes to weather and other things like that. That is also, again, Akin has mentioned this in terms of the timeliness. It's a very time-bound activity, but it's also because of our climate is changing. Harmattan is coming later than usual. Rainy season is a bit longer. You then have to also, the way you farmed last year and the dates you farmed last year, it's probably going to be very different this year. So it's about building a system that is able to easily aggregate in a chronological order, when should I be fertilizing? And again, that's something that our product provides. It's a web-based platform that is accessible using a smartphone and internet access. There's still some farmers that would only have USSD technology-enabled phones, but our position is that we actually designed for smartphone access because, for the reasons I mentioned, because if we continue to rely on analog solutions like a feature phone that only has USSD, you would be unable to scale timely updates that are changing based on the weather. So yeah, the technology infrastructure is a very important element of the solution we're building. And finally, just to add as well, to support farmers that don't have that technology savviness, we actually group our farmers, 50 farmers to 250 hectares. That makes a cluster, and each cluster has a cluster lead who is typically a very tech-savvy person that is responsible as your subject matter experts for the rest of his cluster members. So we also find that helps in upscaling technological adoption, which is, given the environment that we're moving into, it's really a no-brainer. And I think as we saw with the pandemic, importance of being online could not be over-analyzed. Thank you for that, and a pleasure being on the panel. But I'll leave my very able candidates to continue the rest of the conversation.
And we have your contact, so we'll be able to
Sure,
talk to you.
no problem. Thank you.
If I show a clap.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
While we continue with the panel, so I'm back to Simon. Said a lot of interesting things about carbon credits. It's just the hairs on my head too. That's important for us because that's a whole new area. Maybe not too new in other climes, but in Nigeria is a whole new area. So I wanted to understand, how are the Nigerian financial institutions working with you, or what do you know about their work with respect to carbon credits, carbon finance, and tying that together with how the smallholder farmers you work with, do they even understand what that means? What does that mean? And how can they access that opportunity?
Thank you. This is a fairly new concept. Carbon finance, it's only really within the past 12 months. COP26 was where there was a significant change in the mechanism that governs climate change, action and investment. And at COP26, something called Article 6, that there was an amendment that facilitated informal carbon market being used in a way that can help countries address their under. So what that meant was that there's a lot more interest from people who want to now find projects and technology that can solve the climate change problem. They pledged at COP26, I'm not so up to date with COP27, but at COP26 they pledged $164 trillion. It's quite a lot of money. Find a way of solving climate change. Now, our farmers have an underutilized waste, which is predominantly carbon. And if you were to look at a map of the world and ask yourself, where is most of the carbon produced in the world, it tends to be equator. There's a lot more biomass that grows in places like Nigeria and in Alaska. The problem is, how do we convert that carbon to stable form? So the plants, and this is where farmers are the best people to help solve climate change problem. because the plants are actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere in the form of a gas, CO2. They then combine with water and sunlight and nutrients and build carbohydrates, which we then eat. So if you do nothing, those carbohydrates, after we've eaten them or after the plant died and rot, are going to return back into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide as methane. That's called the carbon cycle. And it goes round and round again. Plants will then absorb dioxide. What we do, what our technology does, is it stops, it breaks that process. So the carbon, rather than returning back into the atmosphere as a gas or the greenhouse gas, is now fixed solid form of carbon, typically known as charcoal. Okay? But the traditional way that we produce charcoal creates emissions that just go back into the atmosphere again. So it's a polluting way of producing carbon. So our invention effectively produces charcoal without creating those emissions. And because we've captured those emissions, we can then say the solid carbon that's left is put back into the soil, has taken carbon from the air, through the plants, through our machine, into a solid form that goes into the okay? And that means we've removed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and put it in the ground.
On the strength of that, let me...
They have questions. I think there are a few things you didn't touch that would inform decision making. They will ask you those questions, and I'll just hand over the mic to our.
Doctor, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. Your company is called EasySource. So EasySource is it solely for sources? Is there other businesses you're doing alongside EasySource?
It's an offshoot of the source business. So it's actually what we are looking to do is to expand these two lines even under the EasySource name.
My question is, everything is source here. Are you doing like maybe, are you selling bicycles with EasySource?
No.
So you get what I'm saying? You get the question, right?
Yeah.
So all you do is for this food processing stuffs.
Yes.
That's what you do with the
Correct.
EasySource. Are you the sole owner of EasySource?
Yes, I am.
You are the sole owner.
I have some minor partners.
You have partners.
And
how much shares are there for those partners? Are you giving?
I have excess of 90.
You have excess of 90. So you have only sold maybe about 10% of your business.
Other people own about 10% of the business as it currently exists.
Okay. So you have 90% of this business.
Yes.
Fantastic. You've done very well. And then just for last year, you've done 250 million. When did you start this business?
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Well, we set it up and then commissioning and operations is actually 2016, actually.
Okay.
2016 is when we started producing. I think we started messing about in the bush about a year or two before that.
Yeah, because I'm trying to get the background of your business so we know the rates at which you grow. So because the growth rate is very important to any investors. I don't know for me, I don't know for my brother. You have so many markets from what you said. One of your major markets, I think, is Nigerian Army, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it is not a problem. Even if you're only giving them food, we have no access to.
They don't like you talking about it.
But you have to source funds.
Yes.
No way you will not discuss your markets with them, because it is for this market will be comfortable to. You are looking for investment of about $12 to $20 million.
That's correct.
That's not in no way small amount of funds.
It's not.
You get, and then you have your cash flow for this.
Yes, we do. I don't have the numbers here.
You have
The numbers are being worked on. In fact, when I came to the realization, as I said, deal room in this summit, I just quickly sent out the profile of the company to say, see what we're doing. As I'm talking to you, people are working on the numbers. What is good about the whole thing is we have 5 years audited, stamped account statements.
So, do you know your rate of growth? Your first year, how much did you sell? We have the last year's 25 million. So can we go backward? The year before last, how much do you have an idea?
We